Sean, thank you for coming on. It's been difficult to get all the stuff to you, but we made it happen. And yeah, now we're on for real. So once
Yeah,
again,
it's good to be here.
yeah, I appreciate you. I've been looking forward to this one, and when I look for interesting people to talk to, sometimes I hunt everywhere. Whether it's social media or articles or books and whatnot, and I came across your content first on TikTok, where you already have a relatively big following. It's almost at a quarter million, I think, and it's an indication that your message is striking a chord with people, for sure, to say the least. And
Hmm.
and a lot of it is due to the fact I think that we have maybe more time. We have had more time recently to kind of look inwards and dissociate from the this crazy trip we have in the world that is our day to day before, let's call it pre-COVID, where we were just
Hmm.
like 10,000 miles an hour doing our day to day routine, and we kind of were forced to retreat, whether we like it or not, and kind of face ourselves. Look inwards, look in the mirror, be in our relationships, be with ourselves. And I think a lot of people are finding things they don't like, and a lot of people are finding things they do like. Things that were kind of like hiding in the
Hmm.
shadows of being, full force in our routine. And it's interesting because this is where content like you're creating is coming in and saying, hey, like, do you want to improve those areas that you're feeling uncomfortable with, whether it's your weight or your happiness or the way you even perceive the world? And that's why I think a lot of people are connecting with it, and I have no doubt it's going to keep growing and rolling like a snowball. And maybe this catalyst that we've been perceiving as a negative, right, the pandemic, is going to have
Hmm.
long-term positive effects that kind of pushed us maybe a century or a decade further into exploring ourselves spiritually, and mentally, and health-wise. So,
Hmm.
what's your take on that? As looking at this entire thing as a catalyst for positive change,
Yeah, hard times are where strength comes from. You
right?
got to go through stuff you don't want to deal with. It's stepping outside the comfort zone, dealing with discomfort, and dealing with hardship is really where our strength comes from. And that's a big part of my life philosophy there and my coaching and everything I suggest to people everywhere I go. That's what I preach. Every time they're, complaining about some hardship they're going through and dealing with life, I just got to remind them, well, what is it you're trying to do with your life? Like, do you have like some goals, aspirations? You want to do something great, something amazing? Well, you kind of have to be a great and amazing person to do those things, right? You can't just, grow into an amazing person who does amazing things as life gets easier and everything falls into place. That actually produces the opposite effect. That's actually what makes people, weaker and more lazy is when life gets better and we get comfortable and, we're living on the fat of the land, you could say, and we have everything that we need. That's when we get lazy and comfortable. But then when we have to become resourceful and things get difficult, that's where all of our strength comes from. And it's going through those kinds of hardships that enable us to achieve some of our bigger goals and bigger dreams in life. You have to get through that hardship, and you have to learn how to reframe things that would normally bring you down. You have to take those things and reframe them into something positive and constructive, maintain high vibes, if you will, is a big part of what I practice and preach too, because when we're in these more resourceful states of mind, then we're able to access those more constructive ideas, the more positive thinking, the feelings, the vibes is where your feelings beget your thoughts and your thoughts beget your feelings, and it's this back and forth feedback loop. And so you want to step in on that feedback loop anywhere you can and just start a positive vibration and let it pick up momentum and snowball into something that you want, as opposed to the opposite happening where you frame something negatively and why does this happen, we have to deal with this again, they're closing more stuff down, shucks, now what am I going to do? And you get into that negative spiral, and then there goes your day, and then possibly your week, and it just builds. It's a feedback loop. Your negative thoughts will give you negative emotions, which give you more negative thoughts, and same thing with positive.
Sure, I couldn't agree more. And
Mm.
I want to dig into this adversity as fuel, as something that builds us a little deeper. But before we do that, do you mind giving us a general intro on who's Sean? Why are you doing what you're doing? A little bit about yourself and your journey. How did we get here? Um, Give us the who's Sean spiel, if you don't mind.
The short version, geez, well, I'm really into philosophy, psychology, spirituality, personal development, health, and fitness. Those are my favorite things, my most, cherished subjects and areas of interest that I've had with me for almost, 20 years now. There was a time in my life, 7 or 8 years ago was my major spiritual awakening. And, at some point, it was one of those bottom points because I've been through, a heck of a rough road. Used to drink all day, every day, do plenty of hard drugs. Used to be plenty depressed and suicidal and just you name it, just really in really bad shape. And then there was one of those days there where I just had to really sit and ask myself, well, what the heck would make life worth living? What would have to be going on here for me in my life in order for me to feel like I would like to actually stick around and do something, And I look back and I'm thinking about the interest because I've tried so many different things, right? I'm very much a novelty junkie. I like trying new stuff. I like learning. I like exploring. I'm always about what's new, what's interesting, what's next, what else is there.
Sure.
Um, but you need both. You need depth, and you also need that broader perspective and that variety. It takes both to create a balanced life and a balanced mind. And for me, when I look back at the like the one thing that stuck with me this whole time that I've really been into and I've really been passionate about and I know a lot about, it's like personal development and philosophy and spirituality and psychology. I got into all this stuff when I was a teenager. My dad was an entrepreneur type, and so he had all these audio books, Jim Rohn, Brian Tracy, Tony Robbins.
All the
Like I
classics.
grew up listening to those guys. Yeah, I grew up listening to those guys. He had the whole library there. I just, we'd listen to him in the car, or I'd borrow them and go listen to them on, my own on the bus. Had my headphones on, and which were probably about this big back then, and
With a Discman,
yeah,
one of those CDs.
yeah, yeah, the little cassette player, and then that was high tech, man. I had to wait till high school till I got a CD player and digital music.
Yeah.
Wow.
Right.
but but I grew up listening to that stuff, and so I grew up with the personal development, and um, it's interesting because that's what led me down this whole path of just being young and naive. I prioritized making money and financial independence. That was my master plan for life.
Mm.
Let me get rich, make a bunch of money, and get my financial independence first. And then I'll have time for spirituality and connecting with people and making friends and, finding a significant other and all that kind of stuff. Let me get my money right first,
Right.
and then all the people and everything else will come later. And that was a completely backwards way of doing it.
Mm.
Seemed like a good idea at the time, but that's what led me to so much emptiness in my life. It was, the fact that I was achieving some of what I thought were my wildest dreams, right? I'm there, I was, I got into real estate and I was a mortgage broker like before I was even of legal drinking age. You know what I mean? And we're going, we're making big money every month, going out to happy hour every night and getting trashed and doing all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, well, if I'm doing this and, I bought my first place, I bought myself my fancy 500 horsepower Audi, and I'm going out eating sushi every day, traveling the world, doing everything that I thought I wanted to do. And I still felt empty inside.
Mm.
I still felt like I needed to drink something or do some drugs to feel better about myself and my life. And it's weird. Like, the mind has this way. You can have 99 things going right in your life,
Sure.
and your mind, your analytical mind, is going to go ahead and focus on the one thing that's not going right. And that's where all the energy and attention goes, is on that one thing that's not going right. Even though 99 things are going great, it's your analytical mind is the problem solver. So it wants to find the problem, and it wants to focus on it, and it wants to try to solve it.
Mm.
And then when all you're focused on is your problems, well, now you're kind of blind to the things that are going well for you, and you're not even thinking about that.
Right.
You're not
Yeah, they did a lot of researches
appreciating it while it's
about,
happening.
proving specifically how our mind latches onto the negative. It's it's
Yeah,
proven. It's scientific.
yeah,
The data is
the
in.
story. So
Uh,
that was my interest. My major spiritual awakening happened about 7 or 8 years ago, and it was the death of my father that was the big catalyst for that. and that's what got me to take a month off of work to be with family and do that kind of stuff, and then tried going back to work, after taking a month off, and I was in commercial real estate at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And, I'm sitting there at my desk and I'm, trying to make my phone calls and, reconnect with people. And I'm just like, what the hell am I doing here? I'm only here for the money. And I'm here, bullshitting myself this whole time, trying to tell myself, oh, yeah, no, I love this. I love real estate and apartment buildings. Oh, I can't wait to pick up the phone and call this guy and tell him about this 8.5 cap rate, building I got for him. He's going to love this. This is going to be a great day. I'm
Right.
like, come on. You're just doing this for the money. Let's just be real honest here. And that's what, I literally quit that job there, took my last paycheck, and of all the directions I could have gone on this new spiritual journey, I quit my job, took my last paycheck to Vegas, and became a professional poker player. And I did that for a number of years after
No
that
way.
because I wanted the time and space to just make my own schedule, and it allowed me to do that. I'd wake up every morning. My first priority was my own spiritual practice. I'd meditate, I'd chant, I'd do my reading, my writing, study my philosophy. That was the first priority. And once I did everything that I, felt was the most important stuff for the day, my own learning and growth process, then I went out and went after the money.
That's very interesting. So before we move on from that, let me ask you, it seems like there's this pivot point for all of us that, we make major changes in life. Some people, call it the fucking moment or rock bottom. Do you think
Hmm.
the death of your father or something with combination to that was your moment of realization, like that you're doing it wrong? Was it like an area an area in time where a realization came that you're not focusing on what really matters, or how did that work for you? What was the pivot moment for you?
Like I had to get beaten over the head so many times by life and so many just the number of times I thought I hit rock bottom because I was a raging alcoholic. I was, drinking myself silly literally all day, every day for weeks on end and doing plenty of drugs and like
Wow.
just the withdrawals and the hell that you go through with all that. Like the number of times I hit rock bottom over, a decade or two, a lot of times. And so I say that the death of my father was kind of a turning point because, here I am sort of, scraping along the bottom and I'm still dipping down and trying to maintain. But then, the priorities shifted and life didn't turn around right away when the priorities shifted. There was still an adjustment period.
Sure.
But then, once the priorities shifted, then I started feeling better about my longer term prospects and better about, just sticking around, you
Mm.
could say. Because it's like, well, I had that. It was an unbelievable sort of out body experience, mystical union with God. Call it whatever you want, but it showed me a hell of a lot. I was sitting. I spent so much time meditating and contemplating the deeper questions in life. Where do we go when we die? Where do we even come from in the first place?
Sure.
Right? What's God? What's heaven? What's hell? These are the questions I was sitting, meditating on, and really just looking for the answers on. Playing with the empty space and trying to find the answers within myself or, possibly from beyond through that connection to whatever it is that's beyond. I'm like, well, where are these answers? They got to be somewhere. And finally, after, a year or two of that, the answers came in spectacular fashion. And, complete out of body experience. I was unconscious here and, experienced a heck of a lot, saw a lot of different things. And it just sort of became obvious to me like, okay, I see how this works. This is all your own creation. It's all happening within your consciousness. Like everything that people call objective reality is really just consciousness and their own habituations and their own beliefs objectified, is what people call this world, this plane of existence here. And that just became really clear to me. And so I'm like, well, this is my own making, my own choosing. And when you're on the other side and you can actually see how it happens and how it's done, then it's just kind of like you really have to step back and stop being so mad at the world and still mad at yourself. Because the nature of the enigma is, if you figure it out when you're there, well, then you pretty much collapse reality in on itself.
Right.
If you figure out the true nature of reality and that it's all imaginary and that you're making it up, it's kind of like going lucid in a dream.
Right.
Sometimes when you realize it's a dream, you wake up from it. But the trick is to stay lucid while you are dreaming, or some people call that enlightenment, when you wake up and you're still here on earth and you're still able to maintain your presence here. But you still need to have an ego to do that.
Right.
The ego part is people talk a lot about ego death and all this kind of stuff, but
I'm very
you need
interested
that
in the
ego.
subject. Yeah, go ahead. Keep going.
Yeah. right? You need that ego to be here. You can't be here without prioritizing your own survival over other people's survival. That's essentially what the ego is. And it's not just your own, but it's what you identify as you, right? For a lot of people, like your kid or your family, that's an extension of you. And so you're going to prioritize the survival of your own group over the other groups. That's why you earn your money and you spend it on your family and the people you care about. And you're not just going around giving away your paycheck to all the homeless and starving people. Most people don't do that, which is, I'm not saying that they should or anything is right or wrong, but I'm saying in order to get by the way that things are set up here on Earth, there has to be some prioritization that takes place. And that's where this, sort of ego mind comes in,
Sure.
and the survival instincts, you could say.
Oh.
I forgot where I was even going on that tangent, but
No, it's good. I
you might
I
you might
wanna
have to. I wander off all these directions. Just bring me back to whatever question you
sure.
asked, and we can go
That's
back.
why I have the Sean notebook. I have it already ready for you. Don't
Excellent.
worry. Sean, let me ask you a few things. Well, everything you talked about, I have written down on as subjects that I want to ask you about.
Okay.
But specifically, since you've touched on meditation and you're already hot on the topic, this is something that I know a lot of people are going to be interested in. I meditate too. Have been for quite a long time. I can't say I'm as consistent as I want to be. Actually, one of your videos is pretty good on, don't make it too complicated. Just do it.
Yeah.
So I'm sure you'll touch on that too. But my question is, I think we're a little bit, I know I am, we're a little bit obsessed with wanting to get to that moment you're talking about. That moment of
Hmm.
realization, that moment of awakening, that moment of whatever you want to call it, ego death, that moment of
Hmm.
this outer body experience. And if it doesn't happen and it doesn't happen and it doesn't happen, people are like, so why am I even doing this? There's this
Hmm.
historian, Yuval Harari. I don't know if you know him or heard of him. He wrote *Sapiens*. Um,
And Homo
Homo
Deus or something like
Deus.
that, right?
Yeah,
Deus. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, that's the guy. He's a meditator too, and
Hmm.
he's actually an extreme meditator. He does it for hours a day, and then every year he goes like on a multi-week or even multi-month retreat. Um,
I
so
like those. Yeah.
interesting. And he says every time people ask him about his experiences, he's like, "I'm not going to answer that because I don't want you to meditate for that. I want you to meditate because the thing is the meditation, not the spectacular experience you have every who knows when." Um, okay, I get that tip. It's a good tip, but also you can't take the excitement and interest out of everybody from that moment of ecstasy that everybody's looking for. They wrote
It's a
about it
big
in,
motivator.
yeah, Stealing Fire, the book. They're talking about this pursuit for ecstasy, and one of those places that people seek it, outside drugs and psilocybin
Hmm.
and sex, whatnot. They seek it
Hmm.
also in meditation. It's a form of seeking ecstasy because you can find it there. Um, Try to give us an insight on how that experience worked for you and how do you think that you got there. Why is it because you were at the right place at the right time? It was because you've practiced enough, or is it because somebody could reach it at their first day meditating and some other person can only reach it 100 years in? What is your experience about how that
Hmm.
works, and why do you think you've gotten to go through that breakthrough in meditation that so many people, do it for 20 years and they're just kind of, they seem to be stuck, not able to um, break through that glass ceiling, if you will.
Yeah. At first and foremost, my awakening was a psychedelic awakening. So it
Mm,
involved acid and cannabis. And I was actually, this was back when I started my spiritual practice, like I said, and that became my priority shifted in life.
sure.
And it was funny because I had been studying, so much time I spent with like psychology, and I'm reading these books by these interesting neuroscientists and such, and even super analytical types, like even like
Mm.
Sam Harris, is talking about psychedelics and stuff.
Oh
And I'm
my
just
God, he
like,
talks about
everyone's
psychedelics a lot.
talking,
Yeah.
like everyone's everyone's talking about this. And, when I was younger, of all the damn drugs that I did, psychedelics were the one I didn't do because I was like, oh no, those make you lose touch with reality. Come to find out that it actually amplifies reality
Quite
and
the
makes a lot of
contrary. Yeah.
those more subtler features in reality come popping right out at you when you amplify reality. And that's what psychedelics do
Right, right.
with your consciousness. So that was a big part of my awakening. It's important to understand that. But there's almost like two different directions we can go here now, because I can talk about psychedelic awakening, or I can go right into the meditation, because there's a lot of people who meditate, and you can spend a lot of time meditating. You can spend 30 years in a monastery meditating and not experience an awakening like the one that I experienced. In fact, plenty of people have done that before, and not gotten, you know that sort of, whatever it is they were looking for out of it.
Mm.
You'll certainly learn and grow a heck of a lot as a person, but with meditation practice, it's not about like some big imagined payoff or something that you think you're going to get to. It's So much of the practice is about learning to be comfortable and accept where you are and the state of things the way they are right now, and to
Sure.
understand the habituations of your own mind, and to notice these recurring thoughts and things that come up. Like, one of the more important things about meditation, and the way I simply think about it at its most core basic level, is that it's the practice of letting go of thoughts as they arise,
Mm.
right? Because the way you get caught up in your mind is when you think a thought and then you try to build a thought on top of a thought, and then all of your thoughts are about other thoughts, and then you're disconnected from, the outside world, you could say. And you're caught up in this internal mental world, and it's a mental world of the ego mind, more so than a higher self, higher consciousness, if you will, because it's all consciousness from my perspective. It's all mind.
Sure.
Everyone talks about like God and consciousness. To me, all these things are the same thing, right? God, consciousness, spirit,
Energy, vibration.
the infinite field, energy. It's all one big thing, and it's all interconnected. Is the bottom line. Everyone's talking about the same thing, but depending on which angle you look at it from, it can appear radically different. It
Sure.
could look like one god or many gods, or his name could be this, or he could look like that. He could have a beard, he could have a hat. It could be whatever you want, because it's happening in your own imagination. So when you actually do go and leave your body and have some type of experience like this, even though you are experiencing the fundamental, like the true nature of reality, there's still that lens of your mind. As you leave your ego body, you're still going through that sort of gateway, that sort of lens of your mind. And as you come back into it, you're still coming in through the same lens. And so your beliefs and your belief system, before you going into the experience, are going to frame what you say about the experience when you come out of it. That's why every time someone has an experience like this, and it was like the first thing I thought when I got back was like, oh my God, I have to write about this and tell the world. And like, oh, it's the same. This is exactly what everyone else is doing. Like, this is where all the religions came from. Like, and now here I am, and I want to go start my own religion. It's like, but all I'm going to say is the same thing that everyone else has been saying.
Right.
What's different about it? It's like just different words, a slightly different perspective, same general principles, same big picture. Um, yeah, we have these experiences, and they look just radically different depending on the angle that you view it from. And like it's like, this infinite center, and you could come at it from this side or this side, or just however your whole experience is, because all you're viewing is yourself and your own consciousness.
Right.
It's all one thing, and you're experiencing yourself, but depending on how you get into it, it really is infinite. It's imagination is what's infinite, and it's consciousness, it's mind, and it could be, you can experience anything when you leave your body. You really can.
It's very true. I mean, you can experience anything even when you're sleeping, and that's what
Mm-hmm.
you were talking about that too. And I took interest in that because I did practice some intentional lucid dreaming. It's kind of like one of those things that sparked my interest because I was like, wait, you want to tell me I can fall asleep, wake up in my dream, and then have whatever experience I want? Okay,
Mm-hmm.
let's see, you know? And
Yeah.
lo and behold, it does work.
What
We,
technique did you use?
what's that?
What technique
Oh,
did you
what
use?
technique? Well, I did a few things, but they were most of the basic stuff. So I would um, make sure that I create habits during my day that are going to repeat themselves subconsciously in my dreaming. So, for example, I would
Mm-hmm.
count my fingers. Um, I would look at my hand just like this, and I still do this today when I wake up in the middle of the night because I want to make sure I'm actually going to the restroom and not just going to pee my pants. Um, and yeah, I'll just hold my hand against some light like the window and make sure I got my 5 fingers, because every time, I don't know
Mm-hmm.
why the heck this is, in lucid dreaming, or sorry, in dreaming, when you look at your hand consciously, it has something weird about it. For me, it's a sixth finger, or like a split finger.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but
Mm-hmm.
this is not something I invented. Everybody out there talking about lucid dreaming repeats the same experience. They're like, look at your hand, count your fingers. There's going to be something off about it. And sure does. I guess it's some, one of those things that just happens to a lot of people, and it seems to work. For me, it does.
Mm-hmm.
But that's what I would do. And then pinch works. Just try to pinch yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's more advanced techniques that never really worked for me unless I looked at them um, after the fact. For example, asking
Mm-hmm.
yourself, is this possible in reality? For example, let's say a Ferrari just showed up in my driveway and somebody gave me the keys. The likelihood of that event in real life is more likely in a dream than it is in reality. Therefore, I should
Mm-hmm.
wake up to this being a dream. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and the more you practice it, uh, first of all, the funny thing is the first time you're excited about doing it, it seems like it's going to happen that night, because your brain is
Mm-hmm.
tuning into this new thing. It's so exciting. After that, it takes a whole lot of practice to get it again. But
Mm-hmm.
reading, the first book or watching the first video, the likelihood of you experiencing it increases substantially, given that your baseline was somebody who never even thought about it. So you
Once
go,
your beliefs start shifting,
right.
yes, it
Yeah, I
enters the
want to
realm
talk.
of possibility.
Trust me, I have beliefs written down already for you. And yeah, it was really interesting because um, it is a very, very unique experience waking up inside your dream and slowly
Mm-hmm.
becoming more and more and more lucid. And there's levels of how lucid you are. Sometimes it feels kind of cartoonish, and then sometimes you can, gain more and more lucidity is what they use for the term. And
Imagine, imagine if you did that right now and you started remembering where you were before you got here on Earth.
extreme.
Imagine if that started like.
It's crazy, and it's exactly to your point that in here is where everything is happening, um, whether
Mm-hmm.
it's physically here or energetically here. It's not my point. My point is the experience can be um, consciously experienced just as vividly in your sleep as it is in
Mm-hmm.
your waking life. Now, there are some things that anchor us here to what we perceive as reality. And again, I'm using the term perceive because we don't really know, right? You've brought it up in one of your videos, like, are you awake or are you dreaming? The point is
Mm-hmm.
made. Whatever this is right now, we perceive that as reality because of XYZ. Um,
The most real thing that you know. It's the most real thing that you can remember, is how I think about that, because your unconscious mind is in control of the switchboard, which determines what memories and what sensory information you have access to.
sure,
Your own unconscious mind is in charge of all of that,
right,
and it creates universes, and it does it all automatically. It's almost by default it does it. It's just like this. There was a first mover, you could say, and now this whole process has been set into motion, and part of that motion is the mind creating reality. It'll create an entire alternate universe for you, just like it does in your dream world. And then it takes your conscious awareness and then it places it inside of this its own creation, right? Your own mind will create an earth for you to walk on. It'll give you a body with a brain and 5 senses, and it'll create other people for you to talk to and interact with, even though they've all been created by the same one mind. Out of the same, what is it made of? What are these people made of in your dream? Mind stuff? God stuff? Spirit stuff? Energy? Consciousness? What? That's what everything is made of.
sure. I agree 100%. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and assuming that this is all happening inside this one brain that is capable of either producing it or tapping into some type of energy source that is capable of producing that type of theater for you, that universe. um, there's an interesting argument that whoever you're talking to in your dreams, and if you practice lucid dreaming, you'd know that you could have full on conversations with somebody that can say things
Mhm.
you've never really thought you knew, or maybe you didn't know.
Mhm.
And there's an argument that that's your subconscious mind. Um,
Mhm.
and the scarier thing is there's a really high statistic that the first thing males do when they go lucid dreaming is go have some sex with some whoever fantasy. And then the question I always point back to them is, you realize that's you, right? Like, you're screwing you.
That's just you having sex with yourself.
Right. Yeah.
but
So,
but there's something different about it. There's something magical about it.
sure, sure.
But
First
it's
of all,
funny
let's
because like
let's
that I
not pretend. Guys, even in real reality, if they could screw themselves, they probably would. But for some reason, we experience this experience. Most people would agree is reality, right? Every once in a while, you'll meet somebody on the street
Mhm.
that's pushing a cart, and they experience reality in a different way. But most of us,
Mhm.
um, we agree that this right now, this conversation, the next person I'll meet and shake his hand today, um, that's reality, the real reality. Why do you think that is? And do you think that the other universes that we get to experience via meditations, drugs, psilocybin, dreaming, are those just there for us to, explore and have fun in? But this is real reality, or are we missing the point completely?
Yeah, habituation would be the short answer.
Mm,
Culture and just mental programming. Like when you get here and your parents raise you, they're basically indoctrinating you into their own belief system. So that
sure.
pattern just gets perpetuated on, and it's this habituation of consciousness that paints the story, the picture that we're telling about it. And once you absorb that at a very young age, and there are different cultures that absorb completely different perspectives about what reality is, right? Like someone who's, deeply, say, religious and believes a lot in the afterlife,
Mm,
they might have everything they're doing here oriented towards, oh no, it gets, some people are even willing to die just so they can, I've done enough here. It's time to move on to the greater reality.
sure.
That's, so much of that is just based on, just the programming, right? And you can go seek that programming on your own after you find the limitations of your pre-existing belief system, and you think that some other belief system is not going to have limitations, so you switch over to that one. But the bottom line is that it all boils down to these belief systems, and we have these definite grooves that our minds can end up in, which most people in the world do subscribe to some particular belief system or some particular explanation of reality. And I consider science a belief system as well,
Sure.
because it's a way of viewing the world, right? It's a very there's a whole bunch of assumptions that come with a scientific analytical sort of worldview. And it's funny because I talk to these kinds of people, and they always, I ask them about their beliefs, and they're like, I don't have any beliefs. I look at evidence, and I look
Mm,
at objective reality, and I think logically and rationally. But they're missing all of the assumptions that they have to make in order to reach those conclusions. You have to make assumptions about causality, about time and space. You have to make assumptions about the effects of consciousness on matter. We have 100 years worth of double slit experiments showing that matter behaves differently depending on whether or not someone is watching it,
sure.
right?
That's
I mean,
that's a scary
this
thought.
kind
Yeah,
of stuff,
that's true. Yeah.
Yeah, it's this kind of stuff that I'm talking about. And so and also big part of science, you have to isolate variables, right? But if everything is interconnected, how do you isolate variables?
That's a very,
Like
very good.
these are assumptions.
Yeah. It's a
Yeah,
very.
these are all the assumptions you have to make in order to conduct science. You can't be a scientist unless you have faith and you make assumptions about these things. Like in order to like a lot of scientists will believe that objective reality exists and that there's this objective world here that can exist independent of our conscious awareness. How on earth could anyone possibly know that? Because in order to demonstrate that it can exist without consciousness, you would have to not be conscious to demonstrate that. So it takes faith to believe that an objective reality would exist if there was no life here, or to believe that this was here before us and that we came from it. You can't possibly know that. You
Sure.
would have to not be conscious to know that and to see that that's even possible. So, like, these are all the assumptions and the faith that go into it. That's why I say that science is a belief system.
Sure. And
But, anyways, these are all these grooves that we end up in.
yeah,
Um,
I have to agree. And it's I'm sure there's a lot of scientists out there that wouldn't, and it's just how it is. But it's because also there's a lot of Christians that wouldn't agree that there's anything else outside of that. The point is, you have to live in some constraints that are based on your faith in something in
Hmm.
order, to build something tall enough. You have to have your constraints and faith have to have some foundation to start building on top of. Like you said, there is no way to just go all the way down and philosophize and get to an area where you have perfect solid ground that we can work on as proof. I
It's
agree.
groundless, is the bottom line. Reality is groundless. That's the paradox of reality. There's no ground to stand on. Reality is like a giant dictionary where every word points to another word. Oh, you want to know what a word means? It means these words here. But what does that word mean? Ah, it means this over here. But what does that? And there's no ground.
Right.
Every word points to another word.
So, in your opinion, if you break it down, because you were talking about parents and cultural, habituation and all that, if you break it down generations and generations backwards, keep going backwards in time, do you think we were closer to the original design and we got further and further away from it, or are we developing towards something inside of that timeline?
It's cyclical, right? So a lot of people think of like consciousness and higher consciousness as a linear sort of thing,
Hmm.
right? Like, oh, we're down here and we're dumb right now, and then we're evolving and we're getting smarter. And we were this dumb before 10,000 years ago, and now we're getting smarter and we're evolving our consciousness and we're going up to the top. And then once we get there, I don't know if they even get that far in their thought process, but there is no top. What you could think of as the top, as like sort of the peak God consciousness, I would call it, where you are omniscient, you know everything, you can see everything, you are everything. Once if you do get to a state of consciousness like that, you're just at one particular point. It's like there's a circle, right? And so you might be down here at the bottom of the circle, and you think that this is the low point, the beginning where you're starting at, with from your humble origins, and you're starting down here. And as you work your way up towards God consciousness, you're getting there, and then you reach that sort of peak where you have everything, know everything, see everything, understand everything. But then what happens, right? What do you do once you're there? In all seriousness, like what would you do if you had God consciousness and you could know everything, see everything, do everything? Like, what would you do? It's very much like playing a video game on God mode.
Sure.
How long could you play a video game on God mode for, where you have all of the resources you need, all of the weapons, you got all the maps, you know where all the secrets are, anything. Oh, what's the mission objective? Yeah, I can just push a button and I beat the mission. No problem. I'm God, right? Like, there's no adventure, there's no story, there's nothing, there's none of that.
Right.
There's not actually anything to do when you're God, if you think about it. Like, you would think, oh well, God would want to create and do all this. Like, why though? What's he going to gain by creating? Right?
Sure.
Like, there's this giving, but who are you giving to? You're giving to yourself, but you already have everything, so you have to disconnect yourself from the fact that you already know all this, you already have all this, and you want to create a finite experience for yourself. That's what you want to do when you're at the top and you're at that peak. You don't want to stay there at the top of the mountain and just camp out there and live there forever. You don't want to. It would become uncomfortable. It's like a meditation you could do. Pick your favorite position on the couch, your favorite lazy boy chair, where you just sit there, even if you take your favorite drug or whatever, and you sit and you're just blissed out. Eventually, something's going to change and you won't want to do that anymore, right?
Sure.
Even the simplest meditation, just stone cold sober, you probably only sit there for about an hour before you started getting really uncomfortable and you wanted to change or move or do something different. And that's exactly how sort of peak consciousness is. You want the adventure, you want the story, and you want something to be different.
Hmm.
And in order for something to be different, you have to create this sort of story, this narrative that where you're disconnected from your previous memories, and now you've got this adventure. You're disconnected from your powers, right? You have the sort of connection through your own mental connection through your source energy, so that's still there. But for the most part, it sure seems like you're on your own here, and you're on this adventure, and you're trying to figure it out for yourself. It's
Sure.
like one of these best-selling video games where you're there and you start from humble beginnings. You don't have anything, and you got to go out. You got to do simple things. You got to learn and grow, build up your resources, and now you've got this whole storyline. And the only way that things feel better, once you do something or achieve something, is if you have to work for it to get there. That's where all the satisfaction and fulfillment comes from, and that's a big part of why society is suffering so much. Is when you have stuff that's handed to you and you don't necessarily have to go through much for it, like wealth gained through vanity.
Hmm.
There's a lot of celebrities, a lot of very wealthy business people out there Like I was one of them, achieving my wildest dreams. Look at me, what I was doing, making plenty of money, hanging out and doing all the stuff that I thought would be amazing in life, but there still was no fulfillment in there. There wasn't the lasting oomph, because it was so much of it was based on instant gratification. And that instant gratification and that sort of self-pleasuring doesn't lead towards more growth and more ongoing fulfillment. It sort of short circuits that whole process. And what you want to do is something sustainable that you're able to get your joy and your dopamine kicks from and feel good about, but also move forward in the right direction towards what you think is important. It's just this ongoing process where you just one step at a time, keep learning, keep growing. You got to do stuff that makes you feel like you're accomplishing something or fulfilling something. And that's going to involve moving towards what you believe higher consciousness is, essentially. What you believe wisdom and love and growth, acceptance, all of these things are. If you're moving towards those things, you're going to feel good about yourself and you're going to feel fulfilled. When you're laying in bed at night trying to fall asleep, you're not going to feel like you need to have a drink or a tub of ice cream for closure on your day so you feel satisfied about the work that you did. Like you're already getting those dopamine kicks from that. And a big part of why people aren't experiencing that right now is because we live in a society where there's so much abundance, so much overconsumption, and so much instant gratification. Right? You get this instant gratification, and that gives you a huge dopamine release, and you're just up here, cloud nine. That feels 100 out of 100, right? You're great. You're eating your favorite food, you're drinking your favorite drink, doing your favorite drug or whatever it is, or your favorite instant gratification activity. Well, that's your new baseline now. 100 is now what you want to feel like and are habituated to feeling like every day. And if you don't feel like that tomorrow because you're busy working towards your goals, and achieving your goals feels good, but you might only get a 50 now on this relative scale. Now you get a lot of work done tomorrow. You got 12 hours done, big steps towards your goals. Everything's humming. Your relationships are doing good and everything is satisfying in life, but you still only feel like you're at a 50. It's like, it's almost a letdown compared to how good you felt last night. You see what I'm saying? Everything is relative. But if you weren't indulging in the instant gratification and you weren't getting these 100 kicks every night with your favorite, your favorite pleasure, now your new baseline is going to be whatever your biggest dopamine spike is that you're getting from the day. And what is that from? Well, if you work hard, you work towards your goals, you get what was a 50 is now your biggest dopamine spike, right? Now that's 100. Now you're getting, oh, I had a good satisfying day at work. I had a wonderful dinner with my family in the evening. Got to do a little bit of reading and growth. I got my next day planned out. I feel 100 and I'm going to sleep like a baby tonight.
Right. I couldn't agree more. And it's the same argument I bring to people when, as a fun conversation, we bring up, immortal life. I was like, would you want it? And, it's surprising how many people say, sure, yes, easy, absolutely. But it's the same exact thing as, being in God mode. You can do okay, you have 150 years to go build a business. Okay, now you have all the money in the world. Okay, and the next 500 years you buy cars and do all the things you want to do, and whatever, follow your bullshit, materialistic dreams. Okay, 500 years, right? You probably ran out of steam there. Okay, 1,000 years, you're gonna find spiritual awakening, and what next? What, you're gonna do this for another 10,000 years? 100,000,
Mm-hmm.
a million, a billion? There is no such thing
Forget.
as value when you're in an infinite loop situation where it's basically whatever you do, there is no possible way it will ever reach satisfaction because you're constantly, like you said, if there's no journey, if we're not moving on this timeline, you're basically
Mm-hmm.
already there at every given moment. And if you're already there, why even try to get there again, right? So
Mm-hmm.
God mode is just the same as immortal life. Basically, there is no enjoyment, and this is what we miss a lot because most people, the thing that's implanted in our minds, and I say this on myself too. It took me a while to even came to realization that it's a thing. Is that the idea of success, the concept of success, is there. You need to go there to success. You need to go there to happiness. It's a journey that you're going to have to take, and the journey is going to suck. But the point that you get to is where, relief is, as success, as happiness lies. All of there, it's in the far future. Some people call it the American dream or retirement. or reaching a certain financial goal. But at the end of the day, if you look at what we just talked about and break it down, you understand that
Mm-hmm.
none of that is true. The only thing that's true is the journey. Where it goes doesn't really matter. If you gain financial wealth, or if you gain, physical health, or if you gain any sort of skill that you've been wanting to acquire, the whole point is the journey there. If you don't enjoy that and the process and the whole
Mm-hmm.
time there, when you get there, you've spent your entire life maybe um, wasting it on trying to get to something that is just going to be a quick gratification that you might enjoy. And
Yeah.
people testify to that all the time. Olympic athletes are the first to admit that they have this huge crash after a gold medal. They spent their
Mm-hmm.
entire life uh, going after this goal. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that that's a goal not worthy of pursuing. And most of them will also say that the journey was amazing, but it's so intense that when they get to that peak, there's this instant subconscious realization that what's after this? You know,
Mm-hmm.
I don't even know.
Yep.
Um,
Didn't plan that far. You thought you would just, I've arrived and I'm going to be blissful now for the rest of my life.
no, absolutely
Not
not.
quite.
Yeah, and that's the amazing thing, is that I think that moment is the realization that the journey was. I mean, somebody who made it to the Olympic top in any field has been enjoying most likely the journey. Otherwise, they wouldn't go that far. Luckily for them.
Right.
So I think it's the moment of realization, and I'm totally speculating that there's a realization that comes, and it's like, okay, this was the most amazing process of my life. But if tomorrow I'm not trying to train for the next thing like this, I don't have another journey laid out in front of me that's going to give me that type of satisfaction. That's the
Mm-hmm.
scary part, because just winning, I think, is not enough. I mean, I feel like Michael Jordan explains it so well in his documentaries too, that it's not that, okay, we got the championship and we're holding the big trophy. He's out there every day, 4 a.m. constantly in his journey, because that's the part he enjoys the most. And a lot
Yep.
of extremely, top end athletes would, admit to the same thing. So I agree with your point a lot. It has to be cyclical, and that's the
Mm-hmm.
scary part. And I want to take a hard turn back to kind of where we started off, which is adversity. We were talking about the
Mm-hmm.
pandemic and whatnot, and I brought up the idea of adversity as a constructive force. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so I want to dig a little deeper into this, because it
Can,
seems
can I
like,
close on that?
yeah, dude,
Just to close on that cycle there, really quick
please.
note, forgetfulness is a foundational part of consciousness. You have to forget everything that you've been, because you've already experienced everything in yourself and you've already seen the truth. So forgetfulness is essential. And we experience that even in the course of our lifetime as we're working our way around, and we forget, we've already forgotten a lot of our childhood. There's
Interesting.
certainly those impressionable experiences, but all of this stuff turns into deep habituations, unconscious sort of intuitions, and it gets just wired into our consciousness. And that's where these habituations, these patterns, and these grooves come from, are our experience. We forget them consciously, but we're still wired and we still feel things and know things, you could say, with our heart or with our mind, third eye, however you want to think about it. But forgetfulness is an essential part of this whole cycle that keeps going around.
I
I just
mean,
wanted to close on that.
it's good. And now, I'm stuck again on this subject, because it's like, it's kind of frustrating, that that's
Yeah.
how it is. Because if you're really, looking for meaning, right? You said you pondered on that thought yourself, and many
Mm-hmm.
have. It's just, if that's the cycle, then it seems almost kind of useless, because as an analytical creature, I want to think that we're progressing somewhere, that we're moving towards,
Mm-hmm.
enlightenment, as a species. You know, I don't know why. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
because I want us to all transcend, the inevitable physical death or whatever. Um,
When you do transcend this whole experience that you're having here, you're wiring yourself. Like the part that you take with you when you die is your habituations, right?
mm,
Your own intuition, your own internalized beliefs, you could say, about what reality is, and your own. it makes a deep groove into your consciousness. So that's what you're doing here, and you're sort of just changing your trajectory. You can take all these different trajectories. You don't always go to the same place when you die or when you live, or however you want to think about it, but you're making that groove. You're changing your trajectory, and that, like, that's the part that you take with you when you go. Like, are you building good habits? Are you habituated to feeling love, joy, connection, acceptance on a daily basis? Those are the deep grooves that you want to build, and that's what you want to take with you. You do not want to take with you, I need something outside of me to feel better. I need some earthly pleasures. I need some of this. I need some of that. Those are like what you don't want to take with you.
Hmm.
That's what pulls people back. Those sort of attachments are where your suffering comes from. Buddha talks a lot about that. That's what makes you come back for a body. If you die and you go out kicking and screaming, oh, you would have done so much differently. Oh, I can't believe I did it that way. I would do it so differently next time. Oh, give me another chance. Like, okay, well, that's whatever your mind is focused on. You're definitely making that a much more of a possibility. So you're bringing yourself right back around for another lap in a body, just with that sort of attachment. But then if you're more detached from it, well, now you can, you're not in a hurry to go anywhere. You can spend more time in that space and explore that space, and you know you have more options, would be a simple way of thinking about it.
Sure. So before I go back to where we were taking a hard turn to, what do you think about death and your physical body and your conscious experience? Do you think those are separate? One goes away and rots, in the earth, and the other one goes somewhere? How's that? How do you think of that?
When you die, you wake up. It's your body is made of the same thing that your dream body is made of. It's all made of the same stuff. um, Technical explanations don't get us very far here because it's all very paradoxical.
Sure.
But yeah, you're a spiritual being having a human experience is another way of saying the same thing.
Hmm.
And so when you die, your earthly human experience here is over, and now there you go with the spiritual being and all these habits and beliefs that you've picked up along the way. And obviously those will change when you transition, right? And
Right.
you're like, oh my God, there's still consciousness after death, right? Like before, I was actually like a devout atheist, like very scientific, analytically minded. I used to be angered by religious people, like talking about God and the Bible and all this kind of stuff. It used to bother me
Sure.
because I was like, that's ridiculous. Why do those people believe that? There's no proof. And, all these same kind of arguments that you hear. And I was just all caught up in my own belief system,
Hmm.
and my own belief system assumes that there was such a thing as proof, right?
Sure.
I wasn't wise enough yet to realize that you can't actually prove anything if there's assumptions in your proof. That's not a proof, right?
Sure.
Something like 40 to 50% of published scientific research is actually, they find out that actually ends up, either being invalidated, or they conduct the experiment again and they find that they can't replicate it. 40 to 50% of published scientific research. I mean, you can Google that. It's called the science replication crisis. So like science has already proven that science can be wrong, and usually when it finds out that it's wrong about really big things, that the people who came up with those ideas are still in power. They're still in the establishment. And a big problem with the way the establishment is set up right now, as far as academics go, because I went back to school as an adult just to take a bunch of philosophy and psychology classes because I was into it and I wanted to meet some other people who were into it. And so, you go back, um, there's a lot of assumptions that go into it. What am I trying to get at here?
Let me throw a curveball at you while you're thinking about that. So
Okay. Okay.
there are a lot of assumptions that go into that, but I feel like my romantic self wants to go in the same direction that you are going, but my
Mm-hmm.
analytical self is saying, how come is it not true that the assumption that there's something happening outside our minds, our physical minds, is also an assumption? Because I could also say that this experience, the one I'm feeling, the one you have felt and feeling, whether it was profound or not, that it's happening inside this box, this physical box.
Mm-hmm.
Call it an antenna,
Mm-hmm.
call it this brain, this mush, the gray matter we all carry around. And when that dies
Mm-hmm.
physically, it's kind of like unplugging the TV, and there's no more. So
Mm-hmm.
why do we assume, or can we assume, or is it an assumption? Let me just put it that way, that this thing that we've experienced can happen everywhere and anywhere because it's everything, and consciousness is everything?
Mm-hmm.
Or is it safe to say that that is an assumption, and it just might be that once you turn off the physical vehicle, um, that particular transmitter or receiver, more this is more how I see it, is shut down.
Mm-hmm.
So the experience of Sean, the way you perceive yourself, that's over. Other people can still connect
Mm-hmm.
with their TVs, with their mush gray matter, until they're off too.
Mm-hmm.
And consciousness keeps
Mm-hmm.
existing, and energy is tappable, but our existence is different. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, that's exactly how it is. That's why I say that you can't prove anything. I can't prove my position, and they can't prove their position.
Sure.
And what I was trying to get at earlier when I was talking about, academics, is that they have these ideas, these theories that they put forth, and they teach this as the truth or as the fact or as the closest thing to the truth that they've got, and they're putting that forward, and they're doing that. um, there's already much better ideas, right? Quantum mechanics has pretty much debunked materialism already and has been doing so for the last 100 years. The problem is that there's not proof of the fact that, oh, well, maybe there's only one thing here and it's all interconnected, right? This whole scientific notion about isolating variables, like where do we get these ideas from if it's all interconnected? And we're finding that now, and we're seeing all this evidence suggesting it. Um, there's no proof for these new theories yet. But the problem is that they're like, oh, so we'll stick with our old original theories because we proved those. No, you didn't prove those. You assumed those is the problem, and so they're waiting. They have all these new ideas that they could be teaching, but they're not teaching them because well, you would need to prove those theories first in order for us to bring these ideas into the classroom. You need to prove them first. But the ideas you're teaching right now haven't been proven yet either.
Sure.
Why don't you prove those and then continue teaching them? Or if you can't prove them, just stop teaching them.
Yeah, that's
Because
the
there's a
problem.
mountain of evidence. There's a mountain of evidence on both sides of the argument is the problem, and they're only talking about the evidence on one side.
I
And I was thinking about getting into philosophy. I'm into philosophy, and I was thinking there was a time where I was thinking, gee, I could become like a philosophy professor, and that could be the one department, the one place I could actually talk about real life, the world, reality.
Yeah.
But no, you can't. No,
You
there's a
know what they
whole.
do to
There's a
philosophers,
whole.
right?
What
Socrates,
do
and
they do?
yeah, I mean they kill
Oh
him.
yeah, of course.
Um,
Corrupting the youth. Literally, that was why they killed Socrates, one of the wisest men, back in the days. There, they
well,
killed him for corrupting the youth because
sure.
he was trying to get them to think outside the box.
And like other subjects, you can actually find reasons why people believed that, and you can even
Mm-hmm.
find reasons to side with them, because there is something about our nature of progression, of perception, the way we learn and study, and keep building these blocks on our foundations, that is our the knowledge that gets carried around, that it has to feel pretty certain even if it's not.
Mm-hmm.
So for that example, I'll just say somebody that grows up in the church and ends up being very devout, or
Mm-hmm.
church slash mosque slash synagogue, doesn't matter. The point is,
Mm-hmm.
if you have been brought up and inside that realm where you believe that what you're studying, what you are being taught, the people around you, you're all on the foundation of rock solid truth, and you have
Mm-hmm.
faith in that, then you can build very strongly upon it. And it's whether it's right or wrong, it actually is very powerful. Faith is powerful whether it's true or not. Just like we'll talk about the law of attraction and all that.
Oh, cool.
It's based on faith. And if
Mm-hmm.
you have it in science or religion, you have room to build upon it in a way that is safe, and also very
Yeah.
safe for you, and also it could get creative. Otherwise, if it constantly feels shaky, because where you're living, you're like, okay, I accept that everything is shaky. Not everybody can
Mm-hmm.
live on that plane, because
I
it's
see what you're getting at.
right. We're feeling like we need some level of stability in order to feel like, okay, I can keep putting more and more blocks on this. Otherwise, I'm just gonna have a tower that falls to the side very quickly. And if you go
Yeah.
to a scientist, mid-level scientist, working towards his master's, and say, hey, let's establish that your foundation is sand rather than the concrete you thought it is. I don't think it's going to help them get through their PhD. So as humanity progressing, I think there's an argument to have some people believe something and other people's believe other things, and also accept and agree that not everybody could live on a plane where everything is kind of wobbly. And
Hmm.
Socrates, one of his famous sayings is, the only wisdom is in knowing you know nothing. A lot of people don't like that because it's not comfortable. And if you can't live on that plane, maybe you shouldn't. Maybe it's not for everybody. Maybe
Hmm.
that's the beautiful thing about humanity, that we can be different like that. But I agree with you. I tend, actually, that's the slogan for my podcast. The only wisdom is, you know, in knowing that you know nothing, because I realized later in life, that I do know nothing for sure, right? We just talked about it. The foundation has to have, you keep going back and back into the core of it, you find that there's some assumptions in there. And that's fine as long as, what you're feeling and connecting with is what you're pursuing, and you're willing to open your mind to changes and new information and new ideas and new experiences. And that's how we grow as people. That's how you came to your conclusions, and that's how I'm coming to my conclusions. And I'm sure we'll keep growing as time goes. But
Hmm.
I get why people don't like that, and I get why religion had to exist so far and probably some time into the future, because it not everybody wants to live on a plane that's so unstable. And I also think we shouldn't, as creatures. We're different enough, and seems like the majority of people want some level of stability in their life. Um, and
Hmm.
it makes some sense to me. Does it seem logical to you?
Yeah, I think that's why people say that the truth is ugly, and people don't want to hear it because that it's a tough pill to swallow. It's what you just said right there. It's the true nature of reality is not. It's an equation full of variables, is what it is. It's groundless, and it's an equation full of variables. However you want to think about it, um, and we're trying to solve the equation because that's a big part of our culture and our orientation right now. It's that analytical mind that's dominant in most people, trying to solve problems and understand things. But it is an equation. It's full of variables. You can certainly learn valuable stuff and new stuff. And also, I wanted to comment on that. We were talking about, the idea of faith leading to more productive things. Yeah, the scientist who has faith and believes and assumes that certain things are right can certainly make a lot more new discoveries and useful discoveries, things that make life better, you could say.
Sure.
Um, but there's assumptions in it, and a lot of the time, close to even half the time, that stuff turns out to be wrong because it was based on assumptions. So it's fine to do that as long as you're willing to admit that you're wrong. And this is where it gets into, like, on paper every scientist is like, oh yeah, I'm open-minded, of course, no problem, just show me the evidence, and no problem, I'll admit that I'm wrong. But that is absolutely not how the establishment works at all.
No,
You
no.
can show them evidence that refutes their previous theories, and they're just, especially if there's money in the way,
Oh
they're
yeah,
they're not going to change their mind. You know what I mean? Um,
I agree
where was I
100%.
going with that?
And
Yeah, I'm
you
not sure where I was
you
going.
can argue that Einstein and his equivalents, wouldn't get to the realizations and discoveries they have without some of their foundations. For example, I'm a little bit outside my comfort zone here, and maybe there's a lot of people that could disagree with me. And I'd love to know their opinion. But in my opinion, without the foundation of mathematics, I don't think Einstein could have gone to discover the things he discovered, because that's his solid foundation. That's his God. That's his full faith. He feels like that is the undisputable truth, and that makes discoveries a little easier. You feel like, okay, I got a lot of backing. It's like I have this entire gang behind me. They're all got my back, and moving forward from here
Mm-hmm.
makes it a little bit easier. But if you're on your own, constantly, looking into the unknown, but nothing to step on, no foundation to fall on, that makes
Mm-hmm.
things a little bit more difficult. I don't think if you go back in time and whisper in, Albert Einstein's ear, "Hey, math is an assumption. It's not for sure. It's not solid. It's fluid, and it could just be an experience of how we perceive reality." I don't think it would support his movement forward. You might have turned him
He
into a
would he,
philosopher.
he would say, yes, it's all relative. That's what my theory proves. That's what he would say. It's all relative. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? Is it true? Well, it depends on how you're viewing it, you know?
sure.
Like, how fast are we moving right now? Well, it depends on your perspective. Everything is relative. It would seem like we're being still right now, but, here we are on this planet hurtling through space. Um,
Yeah, we're just stuck on this
what was I gonna?
weird ball. There's a song I like. It's called "Lost in Space." It's in Hebrew actually, but I love the
Hmm.
lyrics because it just simply puts it. Um, we make a lot of noise for a bunch of people just all stuck on this
Hmm.
rock floating through space.
Yeah. And it's there's a philosopher I like, Daniel Schmachtenberger, I think his name is, if I'm saying it right. But everyone, he says, everyone's in a hurry to win at the game that's destroying everything,
Sure.
right? Capitalism, rampant consumerism, making money. Most of the people who are making money in the world right now are making it by kind of destroying the world and destroying our own mind, our own humanity. It's the most addictive, the most distracting, the most harmful things that
Mm,
people are the most into. That's all these gadgets, all these gizmos, all this technology. They want that. They want they want the instant gratification, and anyone who caters to that is going to get rich.
sure.
And most of us in our jobs all support consumption to some degree. I'd say the majority of our everything that our country, our world is doing is all about producing stuff that we don't necessarily need. But the more of it that we produce, the more we're sort of working ourselves towards our own demise. Is
Sure.
really what it's boiling down to. We're destroying ourselves in the process. You know, the process of working hard and doing all this stuff, but then needing to partake in some kind of addiction or something toxic afterwards just to deal with the stress of the world that we've created.
Hmm.
Like, we think we're moving the world in the right direction, but look at the mental health of everyone. Look at the physical health of everyone. Right? Most of the people, like in the United States here, that like they're overweight. They have these diseases from cardiovascular, metabolic disorders, diabetes, brain disease, which is just another. A lot of that is just another form of cardiovascular disease. These are all diseases of lifestyle and overconsumption because we're really stressed out and we're consuming a lot of stuff and we're doing it to fill this empty hole that we're ignoring
Right.
because we're too busy doing other stuff that we think is more profitable and more productive.
Mm.
We're all rushing off in this direction to go in at that race there and make money and have a nice house and a nice car, because you need all that if you want to have a nice family life and you want to be respected by your neighbors. Their
Right.
whole culture and value system is based around, oh, you have a respectable job, and oh, you work for a big corporation, oh, good for you. You have a high ranking position, make a lot of money, drive a nice car, good for you. And like, that's what our culture values.
Sure.
And like, even the way that we celebrate, like, hooray, it's little Johnny's birthday, everyone, let's gather around the table and blow out the candles and then eat cake. It's our culture. It's like, what a terrible habit to instill into a kid. Now he's all into sugar.
Right.
You could just be eating a bunch of fruit and gorging on that, and that would be a heck of a lot less toxic than cake. But so much of the stuff that we label as good and that we're working towards is actually hurting us,
Sure.
right? I mean, like our technology, it's hurting us. It's hurting our kids. Like Bill Gates and some of these kinds of people don't even let their kids use. I remember hearing that before. Don't let their kids use tablets or cell phones.
Right.
I forgot. I don't know. Not even 100% sure if that's true, but there is truth to
There
that.
are some
That you
entrepreneurs
got to
from
limit the
these
exposure.
social platforms that I know for a fact do that, and the reason is because I've seen the documentary the Social Dilemma.
Mm-hmm.
I'll link the guy that created that. I keep forgetting his name. I wish I could drag him on the podcast, but he's done Joe Rogan already, so he can't really go down from that.
He's a big guy with dreadlocks or something.
Yeah, the point is he
Yeah.
is also executive in one of those big companies, and he says we don't let our kids do this kind of stuff, because obviously the damage it does to them, we understand it from the core, and we don't want to. I actually want to talk about this more, but before uh, I lose the track of where my brain was going. Um, is there so first of all, it's a little bit again frustrating that we're on this cyclical trend, but I do think we are on um, not like on a linear, but more like if you look at Bitcoin from its perception. Sorry to compare humanity to Bitcoin, but it's, up and down. The general trend of things seems to go upwards, but you experience these peaks and then big crashes. Overall,
Mm-hmm.
moving towards a direction that is, we'd say improvement. And the reason I say that is because also Yuval Harari, the same author of Homo Deus, he says more people now die from consumption of sugar than the effects of gunpowder, and that the pandemics and stuff like that, in relation to how they used to affect us in history and wars, it's all reductionary in relation to the timeline. It keeps getting less and less of a problem, and then we come up with new things to harm ourselves with. Right now, sugar is more
Mm-hmm.
harmful than gunpowder. Is my point,
Mm-hmm.
or suicide or whatnot. Of course, that's also on the
Mm-hmm.
rise right now, but it seems like it's moving in, generally the right direction, and we're experiencing these dips as we find new ground, and we explore it, right? Because right now the level of comfort in life, the level of ease to just breeze through westernized life, is something we've never experienced before, right? Everyone that's born today is going to experience a level of comfort that we've never experienced before until we fuck it up, right? It seems like we've had, I
Mm-hmm.
don't know this for a fact, but some people would argue that we've already had a few cycles of humanity. There was, ancient civilizations, and
Mm-hmm.
we just, peaked and broke it and peaked and broke it. And I feel like it makes sense. Um, but I want to take this like from the original thought to adversity, as a tool to work on and not escape from. Right now,
Mm-hmm.
I talked yesterday to Sven, from Badass Counseling, about the boy crisis. Some people call it the boy crisis. I don't think it should be referred to just boys, but just generally as humanity. We're
Mm-hmm.
experiencing this extreme comfort, and it's in some forms weakening us, right? You can say it also has um, benefits, but generally speaking, I agree with you that without adversity, or adversity taken completely out of the equation, it's kind of hard to develop. It's kind of hard to
Mm-hmm.
um, toughen up. I don't want to use the word in the wrong context, because some people would perceive it as toxic or masculinity or whatnot. It's not the way I mean it. I mean it in the way that anybody of any gender, or any all of us, when we experience adversity, we have a door, we have a potential, an opportunity to learn, to grow, to improve as human
Mm-hmm.
beings. But the more we shy away from it, we seem to lose those opportunities and close these doors. And what seems to happen is generation after generation, we come from adversity and get ourselves in a position to close that door on our next generation. So if I experience
Mm.
adversity as a child, I want my child not to have it.
Yeah.
And then my child is going
Mm-hmm.
to have his adversities that are not even adversities in comparison to mine, and he's going to close the door on his, until
Mm-hmm.
we're so far disconnected from any adversity at all, that we might have to roll through that cycle again, because we're just we don't even know how to handle the slightest thing. What are your thoughts on
It's
that?
a big pattern to notice. Yeah, that's a very big pattern to notice. Um, and it's funny. I almost think of that as and it's our changes, it's our trying to solve our problems that create more problems.
Sure.
Like most of the problems that science and technology is trying to solve right now are the very problems that science and technology created.
Mm-hmm.
When we get ourselves leverage on our world and empower ourselves with tools and weapons and such, we become force multipliers, and we're not always getting it right the first time because we're error prone, we're people, and we get ourselves into these positions where we've got too much leverage on our world, right? Nuclear bombs, push of a button, we can end humanity. Like, that's way too much leverage for people to have. I don't mean any person in particular, I mean humanity in general. It's just a bad idea to have that much power because we're not fully developed yet. We're not that wise. I like spiral dynamics, as a good model for human development. And the people who are in control of those nuclear weapons are not very far along on their human development scale. The nature of our structure, our government and just how all of our hierarchies are organized, it's usually the greediest, most self-serving people who rise to the top in all of our hierarchies. Um, those are the people. It takes like something like $5 million to even be a part of Congress. You need corporate sponsorship if you want to be in government, because they've made the whole game so damn expensive to get into,
Mm.
right? The selfless people who, come from the local, community center or whatever youth center, and they want to help make the world a better place, they don't have $5 million. And if they want $5 million or money to be involved in government, well, now they have to take on corporate sponsors, and then now they're, it's that whole back and forth, and
Is
we
that
get
a
into
real
all this
thing? You
lobbying
need
and this
five
kind of
million
stuff.
dollars to do what?
Just to be a part of Congress.
Really?
The amount of money that's
Jesus Christ.
required for your own campaign, there was some statistic done. Ron Paul talked about
Oh
this
wow.
and goes into depth
I
on
mean,
the
I
amount of
don't
money that's
disbelieve
required.
it, and I'll look into it, but it sounds about right. And whether it's that
Yeah,
way or another, yeah, the
publicity.
financial roadblocks you're going to run into when you're trying to actually do something good and, like you said, selfless. Good luck with that.
You're competing against other people who are spending $5 million on their advertising and publicity,
Hmm.
and then the people, when they go to vote, they're going to vote for whoever's familiar to them. Is usually how it goes. Whatever name they've heard the most or they're familiar with is what they're going to default to.
Unfortunately, yeah. No, I totally agree, and I don't even want to go into how we get such bad leaders. That's a whole different conversation, and
Yeah.
it, it's a sad thing. I wish we can improve on that. Maybe there's a light at the end of the tunnel if we how they're starting to legalize psilocybin everywhere. Maybe we can have like a humanity enlightenment and just all
Yeah,
go chill a
it would
little
be.
bit.
I think that would be a wonderful thing. Gee whiz, so many people could benefit from psychedelic therapy.
Sure.
Like of all the, because there's plenty of people who are actually going and seeing therapists right now because the effed up nature of the world and
Mm.
life, and everything is out of balance and somewhat chaotic. And so, and like I talk to therapists too. I've gone myself, in times past when I was really depressed and anxious and having family troubles and all that kind of stuff. They all wanted me to go. It's like, oh my God, you're an addict, you're killing yourself, you got to do something, you need help. And of course, those people are not really in a position, not to help me, at least. I'm too much of a smart ass for them. But
You need a
it's
therapist
funny
that helps
because
therapists.
right, but you can make a year's worth of progress in like a day in one freaking session with psychedelics, because it
Hmm.
takes a year sometimes just to get past the person's defensive measures, their facade, their own BS, their own repression of memories and things that they don't even want to acknowledge or talk about or get into. But when you take psychedelics and that whole barrier goes down, the openness, comes out depending on, the psychedelic, the nature of the trip, like especially with like MDMA and psilocybin and these kinds of things, openness goes off the scale, and it's like, you know what, I haven't talked about this before ever with anyone, but let's talk about it right now. And holy shit, there's the golden nugget you've been looking for
Yeah,
how many years, right? And there it is in one session, right? And they're
it's incredible.
discovering all these fantastic uses with like post-traumatic stress syndrome. A lot of actual concrete research on that, or disorder, excuse me.
Well, they just FDA
That
approved
and
ketamine. I had an individual on the podcast that did he did all kinds of drugs in his upcoming, but he was also clinically depressed for 10 years. Kind of
mm-hmm,
bedridden, just didn't want to do anything, and considered suicide many
mm-hmm,
times. And kind of gave this new thing a shot. His therapist kind of convinced him. He's like, "Hey, there's this new thing." It was right before he got FDA approved. He said, "Please, just go and try. It's called Spravato.
mm-hmm,
Put a couple sprays in your nose, sit down in a lazy boy, and we'll see what happens." And
mm-hmm.
he
Yeah.
was on the podcast, and he tells the story that it was that moment where, in that experience, which was complete, outer body, full on, you're gone. Using
Mm-hmm,
Spravato is some composition of ketamine, and
mm-hmm.
that it clicked for him. He felt like it was day one of healing, and since then he never looked back. Um,
Yeah.
so
It was a big part of my healing, involved psychedelics and those
mm,
higher perspectives and actually getting into those areas of the mind. It really shines light in all those dark recesses of the mind, all those things that have been repressed and that you don't, that's just part of where like bad trips come from, and people can have bad experiences with this stuff because it's bringing up that painful stuff that needs to be processed.
sure.
That's where all of a lot of these addictions and just negative patterns are coming from is trying to cover up and distract from these things that people keep repressing, trauma or however you want to think of it, things
Yeah.
hurt, that have hurt you in the past. And even like I just said, I've been to therapists and I'm too much of a smartass for it. Honestly, I think if 10 years ago, with one of those, if I had my first psychedelic trip there when I was in the middle of all my alcoholic and drug induced raging, if I had a psychedelic trip there, holy crap, that could have definitely been an inroad there. Like that could have dropped me and all of my bullshit and just got me to stop being such a smartass and just be open and have a real conversation with someone for an hour or two and see where that leads. Like life could have taken a whole different trajectory years ago if psychedelics were legalized in a therapeutic session
Right. What would you tell
back
people
then.
that are considering it and are afraid of that experience? I personally am somewhat of a control freak. I don't like the thought of completely letting go. And with
Hmm.
psychedelics, it's almost like a term. Like it has to be that way. You have to let go. What would you say
Yeah.
to people that are considering um, putting down that facade, letting go, wanting to get better, whether it's because of PTSD or depression or disconnect with their emotional self, whatnot, but they're just afraid that something horrible is going to
Hmm.
happen within that experience.
Yeah. I think I told you like that was my mentality for most of my life up until recently was
Mm-hmm.
I don't want that that's scary, losing touch, losing control. That was I was afraid of that. And the bottom line is you should be afraid. I'm actually more afraid of psychedelics now than I was before because I understand how powerful they are and what they can do. And that's not an exaggeration. Like it's serious stuff. And so I don't ever recommend just jumping in and trying it. And it's funny because so many of the people that I talk to who have done psychedelics before have done it like in social settings. They go out to a concert,
Right.
this kind of stuff, or out in nature with their friends or something like that. And all of my psychedelic trips have been, solo meditation more often than not, just with an eye mask on.
Hmm.
And, maybe I've got some headphones on or some chanting, some binaural beats or something. But for the most part, it's been my own sacred, time and space. And you got to start small.
When you
Um,
say you got to start
but
small,
more
what do you mean
importantly,
exactly?
yeah, but with smaller doses. But even before we get into that, like you got to, because what the psychedelics are going to do is amplify your mind. So if you've got a lot of anxiety and uneasiness and this sort of stuff bouncing around inside of you, there's a chance that may get amplified. Now, some drugs like MDMA, ketamine, even just psilocybin, some psychedelics in general have more of a tendency, and it's really going to depend on the person as a bottom line, but they can help you with lowering your levels of anxiety and negative thoughts and can actually reduce the mind chatter. And so if you get a nice blend of reduced ego mind chatter and all that anxiety and all that kind of stuff, and then you get the amplification and the turning up of everything else that's going on in your mind, all the stuff you're trying to look at, yeah, where you're trying to get those deeper answers. Why am I the way that I am? How come I, can't change this behavior of mine? What's going on? Why do I keep doing that harmful thing? Well, how do I, fix that? Or what's the attraction there? How do I change that? If you go into your sessions with, an objective like that in mind to answer a question, or many questions, like I think I just mentioned, I was looking for the deeper answers, and those were the things that I was meditating on first. Um, those kinds of going into it with those kinds of questions will of course help you get those answers back, not necessarily right then and there in that one particular session, but a big part before I even did my first psychedelic trip was to just practice my own meditation, my own mindfulness, learn to breathe, focus in on my breathing, and just take control of my own mind. Because if you're not comfortable sitting by yourself for 20 minutes undistracted, if that's hard for you, like I don't think you should jump right into psychedelics. You need to be comfortable because that's if you're not because what that tells me is yet that person is not comfortable with their own mind. So if they take something that amplifies their mind, how's that going to go for them?
Right. That's
Is
a
the bottom
very,
line,
very good
right?
point. I like that tip. And I think I've heard that somewhere before, and I'll definitely amplify the recommendation from you because it's very true that if you sit in a room, close the door, no phones, no uh, what do you call it? No interactions with the outer world, just nothing to stimulate you is the word I was looking for. Just sit.
Mm-hmm.
If you cannot do that for 10, 20, 30 minutes, an hour, you just go crazy. maybe you need
That's the
to,
first.
yeah, that's a good sign to work on your meditation before you do anything else. It's a good point.
Yes.
um, I feel like I'm more comfortable now that of course I've ever been in meditation, because it's just, you grow into it. um, and I'm definitely considering using psychedelics in microdoses until I feel more comfortable with it, because I'm just obsessed with the idea of how powerfully medicinal it is. Not so much for like a lot of people wanting to do it for a concert or whatnot. I'm not really interested in that. Um, but just to tap into those higher self realms
Hmm.
is what I'm more interested in, and I think that undoubtedly it has the potential to do that. Um,
Oh yeah, definitely. Alone in meditation and start small. If we're talking mushrooms, you start with 1 gram might probably be a good dose, or even if you want to start with a micro dose, a half gram or whatever, and then you just work up from there. But again, like, they're going to amplify your mind. So you really want to get good at just understanding your own mind, and then learning how to just, calm yourself down. Like when you go sit in a room for 20 minutes or half an hour and you find yourself getting all anxious, and like, how are you going to cope with that? Right.
mm,
Because you need these coping mechanisms to be built in and become your default.
sure.
Right. If you start getting anxious and you're uncomfortable, and immediately your mind goes to, I give up, I don't want to do this. Well,
Yeah.
no, you need to make a new groove where you learn how to
Right.
breathe, let go, direct your attention to some other sensations inside your body, your breath, the blood moving around. You can feel your heart beating, your blood pressure, your breath moving, and just get comfortable with all those sensations. And you'll become really conscious of all that stuff when you start tripping too. But get comfortable with them in your own skin would be a simple way of thinking of it.
Sure.
And then once you're there, then you can move on to the experimentation and whatnot, and start small, and 1 gram, 2 grams. Terrence McKenna is one of the guys I like listening to. He was a big and I listened to him a lot, and he was big at getting me involved in psychedelics. I listened to hours worth of him and a lot of other people, Ram Dass and these kinds of people, before I got into it, my first experiment. But yeah, listening and then just easing the way in, and making it part of the regular meditation practice. Like for me, I mentioned I was doing this once a week and it was part of my spiritual practice. I already had that time set aside. That was like, you mentioned some other fellow meditating for hours a day. Like back then, that's what I was doing. That was my one session a week where I would sit and meditate for a few hours, on a Saturday afternoon or something like that. And that's where I put my time and energy. And I was doing it sober first. And
Mm.
I was building that practice and that comfort. And I had that time and space set aside, and then I got to the point where the next logical step was, let's see if I can make these sessions more productive. Let's throw a little gas on the fire and see what we cook up, right?
Yeah,
Like
sure.
once you stabilize and you're ready for it, that's when it's like, okay, let's try it and let's increase the dose, and let's try this one, and let's try some ayahuasca. Let's try just experimenting
Mm.
once you have that solid foundation.
Let me ask you, since you brought up meditation and your practice, you're saying you were doing it once a week. A lot of people are like, okay, I want to do 5-10 minutes every day, or an hour a day, or whatnot. Is there a
Hmm.
right way to do it? Is there a way that you would say was more productive for you and not so productive for other people? You think it's more individual? What's your take on technique specifically?
Yeah, as far as dividing up that time, different sessions and different time lengths will get you different results,
Mm.
right? So sometimes it is good to practice for longer sessions, but then also it's really powerful to be able to get yourself into a calm, collected, centered state of mind quickly and efficiently during the day. Like sitting at your desk in 60 seconds, can you close your eyes, take a few deep breaths, and get yourself into a very, very similar, very close to a meditative, calm, collected, almost alpha brain sort of state where you're ready for whatever the world is going to throw at you? Like, in order to do that, you need practice getting into that state, as often as possible. So if you're doing 1 20-minute session a day, well, that's good. You're going deeper that way,
Right.
right? But you're only practicing getting into that state once a day. But if you break that 20 minutes up into 4 or 5 minute sessions and you break those up through your day, now you're practicing 4 times, getting your mind from bouncing around in your beta waves and all your everyday frequencies, and then you're bringing it down to something much more centered and focused. And you're practicing that 4 times as much now in the same day. You're not going as deep, obviously,
Right.
but you're practicing getting into that state sooner. So both have their value, and
Sure.
it's not right to say one's better than the other. You should do both, and you should start with whichever one pulls you in, whichever one it's easiest for you to build the habit with, if you feel compelled and your schedule is like 1 20-minute session works for me, great, do that and start there, and you can do it in the morning. You can do it, break up your midday, afternoon, doing it right before eating, like right before lunch is a great time to do it too. That's one of my favorite times, actually. I do a morning session first thing when I wake up in the morning, and then I usually eat my main meal of the day right around 2, 3, 4, 5 in the afternoon, and that's when I'll do my second afternoon meditation session then.
Right. Which
And
could
as
be
far as
shorter.
right, and then it kind of leads into the law of attraction stuff too. But the best time to do that stuff is right in your twilight hours, first thing in the morning or last thing in the evening. That's when
Perfect.
you're almost passing through those theta waves, those hypnotic. Like this is where hypnotists try to get your mind, or they'll look for people who they suspect can get into these sort of theta waves pretty easily. Some people just get there when they're around authority, for example, and they just, oh, okay, I'm listening. Like some people are just like that, and so the hypnotist who's doing his show is going to go for that person
Right.
who they picks up that vibe from. But you can program your own self. You can hypnotize your own self if you're in this state of mind at this particular frequency, and like they call it theta, and there's all sorts of technical shit about it too, but like once you get there and you start experimenting with it, you'll pick up on it and you'll figure it out yourself. um, but the point is you actually go through this frequency automatically on your way to sleep and on your way out of sleep. You're passing right through it, so that's a great time to do your law of attraction stuff right there. And as well as with meditation, you're also going through some interesting brain frequencies there too. So a good time to, almost like, if you have trouble meditating, like if you're too busy bouncing around and you try to sit down and the monkey's jumping around in the middle of the day in your mind and you can't get yourself to settle down, if you meditate first thing in the morning, it'll be much easier for you to get into that state, because you're coming from hopefully 8 hours of, I'm already settled down. The monkey hasn't been fired up yet. He hasn't had a cup of coffee yet.
Sure.
So he's nice and quiet. He's just waking up. We can get him to sit still much easier now.
Right. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. That's how it works for me. I probably with more practice, I'd be able to do it in the middle of the day when everything is crazy and just find that capacity, like you said. But it has to be built on that foundation of
Mm-hmm.
longer practice in more ideal
Mm-hmm.
environments, which is the morning for
Mm-hmm.
me. After I wake up, take a shower. Before I do anything else after that, just sit down, whether it's for multiple minutes or an hour. That's where I can find
Mm-hmm.
that collective, quiet place. Right, let's say in an hour or two in the middle of the day, doing that would be much more difficult. But like you
Yep.
explained, it's kind of like
And that's the next
acquiring any
level there.
skill. Yeah, it's like playing an instrument, or that the piano, for example. If you do that 4 times a day for an hour, or an hour every day for a month, you can also stop by the piano in the middle of the day and hit a chord with instinct, and that's the power
Mm-hmm.
of repetition and the power of an acquired skill. I love
Yep.
what you
And that
said,
the
and
next
yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, in the next level to that, once you do have a good daily practice, like say you fall into a regular 20-minute meditation session, and now, oh, what's this talk about mindfulness? Everyone's talking about mindfulness and paying attention and all this kind of stuff, right? Like that's like the next level, is bringing that awareness into literally everything that you do. That's the ultimate goal. You want to be fully conscious and fully awake
Sure.
of and with everything that you're doing all day long. You don't ever want to like fall asleep. And most people are on autopilot 95 to 99% of the time, right? They're like, the decisions are already made. They're just on autopilot. They're flowing through their day. They're not doing a whole lot of conscious thinking. But as you start getting into mindfulness practice and you take more of those moments, even just a simple deep breath in, deep breath out, anything you can do to bring separation, and recentering in your day. Like, you're on the phone with someone, you hang up the phone. Now you got to do this thing on the computer. Hold on. Do I have 60 seconds here? Let me see if I can just take 60 seconds to slow down and process everything that just happened,
Mm.
right? Because this still takes time and space. Your mind wants to do this, and it'll do it at the end of the day, or when you're laying in bed at night, or whenever it finds time and space. It's going to want to process the stuff that's been happening to you. And so if you give it that time frequently during the day, and you give yourself time to reflect on and reframe anything negative that happened to you, if you habitually stop for a minute or two or five throughout your day and you do this, now you're building up your own storyline, right?
Mm.
Like say you had, you get off the phone with someone and it was a bad, mixed interaction, and you didn't feel quite great about it. And you're like, that's not really empowering. I don't really feel like I'm all fired up, ready to go do the next thing. Like, well, just take a moment and process that. Like, what happened there? How did that go off the rail? How come that didn't go so good? What could I do better next time? Accept that radical responsibility. Forget about blaming other people. Just think about your your own response to what's happening around you. Viktor Frankl has a great quote on that. He says between stimulus and I forget the quote, between stimulus and response is where all of your freedom and your free will lies, right? He's in a
Beautiful.
concentration camp and he's like, here I am, I got free will. Okay, you want to do awful things to me? Like, okay, well, am I going to react and go, that was terrible, how could you do that? Or am I going to respond and say, okay, well, I can frame this however I want, like, I'm still here, I'm still alive, and who knows, I might even get out of here. I'm
Right.
learning new stuff every day. I'm talking to people, they got interesting ideas,
It's
and
a very
whatever. He's a
powerful,
psych
very
he was a
powerful
psych
book.
he was a psychologist. I mean, he was a psychologist who wrote about the psychology of concentration camps from inside the concentration camp. Great book.
Highly recommended. I'm gonna put it in the link below and
Mhm.
in the description. And it's very short, so people that wanna get a taste of what that type of experience could be, I think it's I'm happy you brought it up. I just reread it, maybe the third
Mhm.
time or in audio, and I'm
Mhm.
really happy you referenced it. It's a really good book and recommended for everybody. And yeah,
Nice.
I agree with you 100%. All right, you brought up the law of attraction. Let me drag you into that world for a second. Um, Let me put my definition on it, and then you can play around with that. You said it yourself
Mhm.
earlier that our minds, when we give them something to solve, they kind of fixate on that. They go around trying to figure out how to fix a problem for us, whether it's a negative or a positive. It doesn't matter. The point is, you present something to it. You create a mini obsession with something. Your mind is out there searching for ways to solve that, achieve that, pursue that, whatever that thing is, and how it's applicable to it. But it's working on something. So the way
Mhm.
I um, perceive it, the way I experience the law of attraction, and I think it's a little bit different than yours. So I'd like to see how they interconnect, if at all. Is more
Mhm.
is more scientific and logical. Fortunately, unfortunately, it doesn't. We're not going to get into this right now. I'm pretty analytical in my nature, and nurture,
Mhm.
I guess, also. Um,
Mhm.
and the way I've always perceived the law of attraction, and I've said it before on the podcast, is that it's kind of like when you see a new car in the street that you kind of like, and its curves are appealing to you, and its color, and now all of a sudden you see it everywhere. It's not that it wasn't
RAS.
there yesterday, and there was the amount changed. It's your mind is now more capable of extracting those shapes, colors, and whatever it is you're fixated on from your environment.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
it's no longer peripheral. It's now something you focus on. It's You're able to
Mhm.
pick it up from your environments. So the environment hasn't changed much, but your intentions did, your interest and focus did. And that's how I look at the law of attraction. Like, I remember when the book, what was it called? The Secret came out back in the day in the 90s.
Right.
And I always thought it's a little too magical. And I was like, okay, why are we doing this? Why are we doing this? And how is it working? And then I thought to myself, when I go back to my teens, and I was 15. I wanted a motorcycle, and that's all I could think about. That's all I could think about. And I remember how powerful just being so fixated on it was to actually making it happen. It was my brain
Mhm.
finding every day and night and day and night the cycle of wanting and focusing made and manifested inside reality ways for me to achieve that. I saw the
Mhm.
opportunity. I needed money, right? So I've manifested my ability to find ways to make money, whether it was a day job or an after school job and delivering pizzas and blah, blah, blah. So that was there. And then I needed a license. So I figured out all of that. And when you focus on something and want it and believe that you can have it, or in your
Mhm.
words, believe that it's already yours, your brain is
Mhm.
going out there to work. Now, if there's a spiritual realm to that, we will talk about it in a second. But I do believe that even on the most physical level, most analytical, scientific level, when you give your brain a task, it's out there to
Mhm.
find a solution. You can also tell it,
Mhm.
I'm dumb. We're going to talk about belief systems. it's going to find reasons to reinforce that belief. So if I believe
Mhm.
I want a motorcycle and I can definitely have it and I will have it, then my brain is going to find ways to make that happen. If I believe that I'm dumb and worthless and ugly, I'm going to find reinforcements in my environment that's happening anyway that,
Mhm.
reinforces my belief that says, oh, look at what he says. If I interpret it this way, that means I'm dumb. Um, the way he
Mhm.
looked at me, that means I'm ugly. The way these people, laughed in the street, could have just laughed at a joke, but they actually laughed at me. That's what I believe because it reinforces my belief system, right?
Mhm.
So that's how I think of the law of attraction. That's how it makes sense to me. It's just our brain is out there to do the things that we want it to do, that we believe it's doing anyway. It's just how we tune it
Mhm.
and control um, and direct it is where we most of the time fuck up. Instead of saying,
Mhm.
I am and I believe and I want and I have all the things that are positive, in my opinion, a lot of times we're taught to think, I'm not capable. And, the first thing that, one of my favorite quotes is, argue for limitations and they're certainly yours. Of course, that if you believe you can't pass a test or you can't run fast enough or you can't get a six pack or you can't blah, 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 XYZ, how
Mhm.
is your brain going to support you in getting there when you already convinced it? It's gone. It's done. There is no way. That's the way I look at it.
Mhm.
It can work for you and against you. What's your take?
We're living in a world of mirrors.
Sure.
So in the same way as if you go out and you're talking to someone, the cashier at the store, if you're friendly, positive, and you're projecting that outwards, you're much more likely to get that back from the other person. They're just going to reflect it back at you.
Hmm.
And it's the same thing with the law of attraction. Really, if you have that vibe of I am or I have or whatever it is we're talking about, um, you're just going to be more in alignment with those things. It's this sort of, not only do people behave that way with their own consciousness, but everything is made of consciousness and it all works the same way.
Hmm.
Your relationship with, I don't know, pick something like, say, it's like a house that you want. I don't know, your dream house, say. If that's what you're going for and that's what you're focusing your mind on and that's what you keep thinking about, well, you can't just keep, daydreaming about it, if you will. But once you start actually feeling it and you start believing it, because these two are very important, and if you do that and you're programming your
Sure.
own your own mind in the morning and in the evening, you're really not only setting into things into motion outside of yourself, but inside yourself as well. You're really changing the way that you think about your life. Like, something almost feels out of place if you don't have it, right? Because first, like, there's this feeling of desire or jealousy, right? Like, oh, I wish I could have that house. Oh, I wish I could have that beach villa. Oh, that would be great. It's not fair. Or what? There's this separateness there, right? But then when you actually start doing law of attraction work and you start programming yourself mentally, it's almost like something is out of place now. It's like, wait a minute, why do I not have the beach villa? What am I missing? Wait a minute. Oh no, I need to make more, calls in my business, or I need to do more of this thing. I need to improve my relationships because I don't
Right.
even know anyone who's selling a beach villa. I need to network and be out there more. It brings it out of you. It's just like, it's a difference in feeling. It's this difference of, not having, or gee, I wish, I hope one day, versus hold on, I'm missing something here. Let me get, and now you have this feeling of, you're much more likely to feel empowered and motivated and driven to do something because you feel like you're fixing something that's wrong or missing, right? Here we go
Sure.
back with this analytical mind who's just dying to sink his teeth into something. But now, if you feel like you're missing something, and you're going to do, people will do more to prevent loss than they will gain, right? And so if you feel like, you might be losing, or you in this odd position that where you don't have this thing that you feel like you're supposed to have, it's like you're tying that in with loss almost. At least I'm trying to here.
Right.
But you'll do a lot more for that than you will to go gain. Oh, I wish I could have one of those. I guess I'll go work and see if I get
Right.
one.
It's a fallacy.
Versus, oh, it's mine. I don't want to lose it.
Hmm.
They're two different things.
Right.
And so I think that's where a lot of the more tangible power comes from.
Sure. Yeah, it's funny that you said that. It reminds me of this concept I've learned recently. I think it's called the sunk cost fallacy, which is
Yeah,
you know that, and
I've heard that.
yeah, a good example is that when we buy tickets for a show in December, right? And
Mhm.
well, now we're in December now, so let's give a different example. In May, right? And the time comes where you actually need to go to the show, and you just don't feel like it. And
Mhm.
a lot of people, our instinct is to go anyway because I've paid for the tickets, and if I don't go, their value
Yep.
just disappears, and it was a waste. And
Mhm.
that is a fallacy. We make up that in our heads because the actual value that was spent on the tickets that was gone the day you bought the tickets. There's no getting that
Mhm.
back, right? Assuming you didn't resell them or whatever. And that's
Mhm.
the sunk cost fallacy, and it applies in everything in life. It's just because you went there and spent your time actually, let's say, not enjoying the concert, and drag yourself there to justify spending that money back in December, doesn't
Mhm.
make that value, better. Actually, you made it worse. The money was spent, and that's it. Now, if you go or not, that's either added value or no value. But if you just don't feel like it, it's a rainy day, you have a tummy ache, you want to just sit at home and, drink soup, you probably should do
Mhm.
that because the cost is gone. The value has already been spent.
Mhm.
So it's just a fallacy to think that if
Mhm.
you go, you're gonna fix that somehow. You might even make it worse.
People live their whole lives like that. Hey, I already invested 4 years in my education, or six
Mm,
years, or 7 years in my education. I'm a blank now, and I have to keep doing this.
that
Otherwise, all that
perfect.
time and energy is wasted. And it's like, is it wasted?
Mm-mm,
Or are you just becoming more developed and well-rounded? Because now you understand all that, and now you're going to move on and understand a whole new different perspective and something
true.
else. Like you're evolving into a very, well-rounded being who's done and experienced a lot of different things. It's not a sunken cost necessarily,
Right.
but that's how some people
That's a
see it.
perfect example of the sunk cost fallacy. And first of all, I agree with you completely that there is no such thing as wasted experience or wasted time. Even if you took a
Mm-hmm.
completely different direction in life and went from accounting to spiritual coaching, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's you bring a part with you that is a part of your puzzle. But even if we
Mm-hmm.
assume that it has nothing to do with your new path, it's still sunk cost. You can't gain it
Mm-hmm.
back, and you can only make it worse by reliving and redoing and continuing to do the thing you don't like. So once you realize
Mm-hmm.
something is not for you, it's time to exit because that cost is sunk. In my opinion, like you said, that there is no such thing as bad experience because I've, let's say my parents got divorced and I experienced a war and suffered PTSD, and those are things that actually happened to me. I look at all these things and they somehow fit in my puzzle in a very, very, very strengthening way, in a very empowering way, in a way that shaped who I am
Mm-hmm.
today. And those are a part of my experiences, good and bad, makes you who you are. So looking at something as wasted time or wasted experience is a complete fallacy. It's not fantasy, but it's in our imagination, and that's how we feel about failure, right? That's why people hate failure and they're willing to do mediocre things in the safe zone to not experience
Mm-hmm.
failure. Where the most successful
Yeah.
people, you might say, are in love with failure because it's not like they're aiming to fail, but they're aiming to live in this realm where failure is a part of the process. It's
Yep.
absolutely going to happen. They accept it. And when it happens, they're excited to extract value out of it because they know that,
Mm-hmm.
okay, I failed. What's the lesson? Instead of saying, ooh,
In a
I'm
lot
going to
of
be
ways, you
sad.
learn more from that.
Right. There's so much value in failure, and we're so afraid of it. And maybe this is a part of our cultural habituation, and we're teaching ourselves to be afraid of failure because it's actually a very necessary part to success. So if you look at
Mm-hmm.
society from a elitist point of view, and from a big leadership that's suppressing the majority of the people, I would want everybody to be afraid of failure because that is a
Mm-hmm.
stepping stone to success. So the more you're afraid of it, the more you're going to run your mediocre course. And I can live here, because everybody knows that not everyone
Mm-hmm.
can be rich, right?
Yeah, everyone's sitting around waiting for a sure thing or a shortcut, an easy way. They'd rather do nothing and just be stagnant, which is not really, you're not staying in the same place when you're stagnating. You're
Sure.
moving backwards, and they'd rather just wait. Give me the shortcut, give me the life hack, the mind hack, the tip, the trick, the easy way. Is what everyone wants, and it's like, no, even if you're not sure and you're not sure it's going to work, you're going to gain experience, and that experience will help you understand what's more likely to work. That's how this whole process works. You have to keep doing stuff and trying, and it's failing, but it's learning, and that's where your learning and your growth comes from.
Right.
Because if you try something and you succeed, well, you probably didn't learn anything because you already knew how to do that. You got it right on the first try. You
Right.
know what I mean? It's like you were 90% of the way there.
Mm.
So you maybe you learned grew a little bit, but you learn and grow a heck of a lot more from the things that you fail at, and you go from 0 to 100. You know what I mean?
I agree
Yeah.
100%.
Which is it's a nice segue. The two health problems that have been bugging me the most for most of my life are just joint pain and stiffness and that sort of stuff, and
Mm.
allergies. And that's been a big part of all my experimentation in diet. And I've tried all the different diet fads over the last 10 or 15, 20 years. It seems like I've tried everything, and I'm always trying to figure out what I can do to make that chronic inflammation better, and also trying
Sure.
to figure out that whole autoimmune thing. I think there's a hell of a lot that people do not understand about allergies, and I'm trying to figure that
Oh,
stuff out now.
yeah. Good luck. There is a whole lot in
Yeah,
it for
we'll see how
sure.
far I
And
get.
it's a big
But
field.
interestingly enough, though, like my allergies and my joint pain get better when I fast, and so that
Mm.
almost makes me think it's something I'm eating. Like elimination diets I experiment with, but I get to when I eliminate everything, I seem to do best. It's funny.
That is, yeah, scary. How true that is, but there's no avoiding the fact that the things we put in our bodies make the body, right? Because we're made of, scientifically speaking, out of cells, and the way they feed themselves, reproduce, and operate in a healthy way is using fuel, right? You don't get something for nothing. So what you put in is the fuel. Now, the quality of the fuel and what the body is capable of doing with that fuel, that's up to the body. But if you give
Hmm.
it crap all the time to deal with and work through, a lot of times not only there's no fuel there, but it also needs to rid
Hmm.
of it. So it
Yeah.
uses the energy it was supposed to extract from the fuel, from other areas of the body, just to try to get rid of these things. And sometimes that's pure poison. Like, I enjoy a casual once a month glass of whiskey, but I'm fully
Hmm.
conscious of the fact that that is poison. The body,
Hmm.
the way it responds to that is, I've been poisoned. Now what
Hmm.
do I do? And a subproduct of that is what we feel, which is
Hmm.
starts good, ends bad, right? But it starts good on the short term, ends bad on the short term, and then gets way worse in the long term because you're ruining your liver. But
Hmm.
even on the short term, scientifically speaking, it's the body responding to a poison that has been inserted to it. Um,
Yep.
and that's true to a lot of things. Also,
And I
some things we think are normal to eat. So
Yeah. And I would take that one step further and say, a lot of the stuff that we're eating, like processed food, like just let's just call it junk food for simplicity's sake. People eat that stuff, and a lot of their health problems and their ailments are, the body responding to poison. It's not an acute poison, as in with alcohol, where you get there's that headache, then, within 24 hours, you're feeling the other side of that. But
right,
the other poison has a much bigger, much longer cycle, and that ties in with with addiction and stuff too. If you're the kind of person who's addicted to drugs and alcohol, well, you're going to get really quick feedback and really public feedback about your addiction, right? And so you might actually
sure.
be able to change it and save your life. But if
That's a
you're
good point.
addicted to sugar and food and potato chips and socially acceptable addictions, well, people are going to be a lot slower to point out that you're killing yourself,
Sure.
and you're going to cross that threshold of no return and end up with your family crying at your bedside when you have your first heart attack. Maybe you survive it, maybe you don't, but that's also a product of addiction. And if your addiction was more acute and you were getting more immediate feedback from it, like a drug addict or an alcoholic, and you were getting socially rejected and your body was rejecting it, if you were getting that much more acute instant feedback, you would recognize it as an addiction and something toxic that your body's trying to deal with. But because it's a milder, more chronic dose, now here comes your chronic illness.
Right. That's a very good point, and it makes me think immediately about the story of the frog in the boiling water.
Yeah.
That's what happens if you're just jumping into hot water, and it's your first attempt at heroin, and
Mm-hmm.
you have some circle around you that actually cares about you. The likelihood of you not going that
Mm-hmm.
route is pretty high, because first of all, it's
Mm-hmm.
going to be a smack in the face, so it's like boiling water, and the reaction around you is going to be extreme. Like for somebody who never done drugs or whatever, they're like, "You did what? Heroin? Oh
Mm-hmm.
my gosh, we're going to take care of you right now. Let's go figure this out. What's going on? Are you okay?" But
Yep.
then if you just jump into these lukewarm water and just shove a bunch of potato chips in your face and drink milkshakes and whatnot. David Goggins
A few
talks about his
beers,
experience with that.
socially acceptable. Yeah.
Right, and you slowly but surely go to a much more dangerous place faster. No comparison between heroin and potato chips. I don't want that to even be associated as a comparison, but we're talking
Mm-hmm.
about a path that will surely and slowly take you to a bad result, versus one that has, like you said, it's less socially acceptable and it's even more extreme in your own perception because of its social consequences, that
Mm-hmm.
you might have even actually do something about it. Unfortunately, even with alcohol, alcohol is too socially acceptable. I don't
Yeah.
want to talk about obesity. Right now, it's like a big thing where people not only um, are okay with it, but they're actually promoting it. So I am not in the business at all of making anybody feel bad about their body. My entire life,
Mm-hmm.
I've struggled with weight. Cycling up and down, and even
Mm-hmm.
now I'm on the better end of it, but not where I want to be. So I understand the struggle. I understand where it comes from, but I would never be promoting someone to ruin their health, in order to have this fantasy that that's what's going to make me feel okay and good about myself. Physical health is the cornerstone of feeling good about yourself. It's extremely important that you first have that
Mm-hmm.
in order to even treat yourself mentally, to feel good about yourself and be okay with yourself. I don't think that, um, if you seek this extreme comfort in foods, which I think is a horrible place to seek comfort at. Personally, I've had that
Mm-hmm.
experience where feeling depressed or upset, shitty day. Oh, let's go find a chocolate. Oh my
Yeah.
God, that's a scary thought. And I want to talk to you about that, about not even having that thought. You had
Mm-hmm.
made a video about lower self, higher self, and just letting go of that thought. Don't even have that argument with yourself. Um,
Yeah.
but I agree with you. It's not a good place to be. Which brings us specifically to the area of diet, fasting, keto. Um, we want to know more about what you do, what
Mm-hmm.
you practice, and all about that. Let me just start with a question. Do you practice keto? Is that your diet?
I cycle in and out of keto. Like right now,
Hmm.
I'm not on keto. I eat, right now, I describe my diet as more whole foods. So I
Hmm.
definitely stay away from the processed stuff.
Right.
Flour is just generally speaking, a bad idea. Refined sugar, bad idea. I ate some blueberries. I got some fruit in the fridge. So I'm eating that now. And that's, the only sugar that's like this, the sweet treat that I would go to. And that's what I would suggest other people go to. If you do get rid of refined carbohydrates and all your favorite pastries and ice creams and all that kind of stuff, and you're going to have sugar cravings, and you're going to need to do something. So go ahead and
Sure.
fall back on fruit or something like that for now. A whole food. There's a huge difference between a piece of fruit, an orange, and a glass of orange juice. Two very different things. And there's
Right.
actually a lot of interesting studies between oranges and apples and all these different fruits, but they'll show you the what it does to your blood sugar, and you'll eat both of them, and they'll both peak at about the same place. If you look at your blood sugar on in your insulin levels on a chart, they'll both peak at about the same place. And then what happens is the juice, because the juice, it burns up all that fuel. When the fuel runs out, boom, the fuel's out. So you actually dip below your baseline on the juice.
Sure.
Whereas if you ate the food with the fiber, the fruit, then you would have this much more gradual tapered drop off, and then you would rebalance right back out onto your baseline, as opposed to the fuel running out abruptly, and it's like an engine stalling out, when you're up there and cloud nine. It's like, whoa, we're all out of gas, the sugar's gone, right? But if
Right.
if you had this sponge of fiber in your gas tank, you wouldn't be all completely out of the gas. There would still be some gas in the sponge, and you can squeeze it out and you can make a safe landing somewhere, funny analogy, but yeah, big
Yes,
difference
it's a good one.
between a whole food and something that has fiber in it, and refined sugar in the form of like a pastry. When you strip all the fiber out of something and you just make a flour out of it, then you add sugar. Like, these are ridiculous ideas, but so like when you're oriented towards that pleasure and that sort of instant gratification, and you want to push your pleasure
Hmm.
button and peak it out as high as you can, that's the kind of stuff that you come up with. But it's important to realize that the higher you shoot for that peak being, that's going to become your new baseline. I mean, the first person who invented that tasty sweet candy treat, once you start eating it, it's like everything else loses meaning. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, I've been
Sure.
working so hard on this candy business and I'm successful and I'm succeeding in my candy business, but I feel empty inside because the joy from this candy business doesn't compare to eating the candy, the
Right.
indulgence, the instant
Absolutely.
gratification. It's funny.
It's yeah, it's as true as it gets. And first time doing like a 2 or 3 months keto, I remember that transition of cleansing completely from sugar.
Mm-hmm.
Even though I wasn't indulging in a lot of candy per se, just taking sugar from foods uh,
Mm-hmm.
out of the system completely, because as we all know, sugar and keto don't mix. You don't get to go to ketosis with sugar.
Yeah.
So going off of it changed my palate completely. It didn't
Mm-hmm.
happen overnight, but a week into it, a month into it, 2 months into it, all of a sudden, the joy that comes from an apple is a completely different world, right? A
Yeah.
blueberry, um,
Tastes like candy.
those type of foods. We're just like you said. This connects to what we talked about before, having this high baseline that you
Mm-hmm.
have to every dip from it feels like a depression, but you're actually already are at the top. So that's like eating a highly concentrated sugary treat and then trying to go to an apple or a blueberry. Like,
Exactly. Your
no
baseline is all
bueno.
messed up. Yeah.
Right. It's
Yeah.
kind of like trying to live your life on heroin versus, reality right here. It's
The
not going to
joy of
feel as
having a
good.
family dinner. You know what I mean? The joy of having a family dinner with your loved ones is nothing compared to getting high on heroin or whatever your favorite drug is.
Right. That's exactly how
That's
it's designed.
yeah.
And that's why it's so addictive and
Yeah.
scary. So let's close something on keto, because my experience with it, and maybe you have a different take on this, is that
Hmm.
it doesn't seem to work very well if you're not going to be precise. Under like other diets, unlike keto, where you're just doing calorie deficits, or let's say high protein, low carb, and vice versa, whatnot, they seem to be more tolerable to not being precise. Where
Hmm.
keto, if you don't hit certain percentages in your macros, you're not going into ketosis. And more than that, you can actually cause damage by constantly confusing your body, because you are turning a metabolic process on and off, and
Hmm.
you think you're doing something, but you're not. So, what's your take
Hmm.
on that? In my opinion, you either do keto right. I'm not saying going in and out and cycling in and out of it is wrong. I'm saying if you're thinking you're gonna do keto, and then you're gonna into the second week have a sandwich, is that something you'd recommend doing, or is that going to screw up the process completely? Because the thing I try to warn people, and this is really where I'm getting into, and I want your opinion on, is if you're going
Hmm.
to the keto, understand it's going to be a little hard. Most people don't count their macros.
Hmm.
It's annoying. It's something you have to get used to. You're probably going to have an app and start reading the backs of products, and
Hmm.
understand and add up those macros. If they don't add up and you don't bother doing it, you're not going to guesstimate it correctly. How do you
Hmm.
feel about that?
Yeah, tracking macros. Anytime I've made a diet change in the past, I use MyFitnessPal, because
Mm-hmm.
it is something that's worth doing at some point in your life. It is a pain in the ass, but you
Right.
should do it at some point in your life, even if it's just for a week or a month, just to give yourself some kind of grounding and understanding of what your macros look like, how many calories are you eating. And I'm not even saying try to manipulate or change your calories, but just track them so you know what it looks like, and you know what it feels like to eat 3,000 calories or 2,000
Mm.
calories, or what happens if you have a low calorie day with 1,500 calories.
Right.
Like, what does that feel like, and how many calories did you have yesterday? Oh, if you had 3,000 yesterday, you can have 1,500 today and be just fine. And in fact, you might even feel really lean and mean, which is kind of what happens to me. If I have a big eat day the day before and a big workout, a big eat day, and the next day I might skimp on the calories and then actually feel fantastic. Like, lean, mean, charged, and ready to, for whatever else I'm going to do, mentally or physically. But another really important thing to understand about keto is that it takes time to develop the ability to eat keto, right? You need to develop the digestive enzymes and build up your, bile and all those things that are required to break down fat. Like I remember trying to switch to keto abruptly the first time and just go from, what was I like 40 or 50% fat calories I was working up, and then I just tried to jump straight up to like 80% of my calories from
Right.
fat, and I could feel unusual things hurting inside, and it was immediate
Yeah.
feedback. Oh, this is not a good
They call
idea.
it
I'm
the
not ready
keto
for this
flu.
yet. Right. No, I mean like gallbladder or something hurting
Mm.
inside, or just like you're not
Didn't
ready
like
to
it at all.
digest this. Yeah, yeah. Like keto flu, I would consider like in the like sugar withdrawal,
Mm.
sleeplessness, the general malaise, and feeling
But you're
low
talking
energy and
more
lethargic.
digestive system.
Yeah, I'm talking like that's the first barrier is you need to build up your body's ability to produce bile and digestive enzymes to break all that down, especially if you're
Mm.
coming off of eating primarily carbohydrates.
Right.
You need to build that up, and that takes time, weeks, if not months. And the other half is you need the actual mitochondrial machinery to
Right.
process and burn fat for energy, because your body has two energy systems. You have the sugar burning system, which is the one that most people operate on, and that's usually the dominant one. And most of your machinery and most of your metabolism is more than likely geared towards breaking down sugars for energy. And then you have the other, these fat burning um, aspects. Without getting too technical, there needs to be a mitochondrial cellular change to the energy system where where your body starts recognizing, oh, most of our fuel now is fat, so we need to like start making some serious long-term changes in gearing our body towards burning fat more. Because even if you have the digestive enzymes and you're able to digest all the food, and say you've got 1,500 calories worth of fat to burn, your cells may not be able to do that. Even if the energy is there sitting in your gut, you may not be able to process it and burn it for energy and actually feel like, I can go do my day. I'm alert and energetic, and I can go work out and do all that stuff. It takes time to build up the cellular ability to metabolize that energy. And that process takes months to adapt to that, at least, depending on where you're coming from. It could take months, 2 or 3 months to get to the point where you can not only eat 80% of your calories from fat, but your body can burn all those calories like as fast, as much energy as you need. We can burn as much fat as you need, right? From day one, it's not going to be like that. Your body's going to be like, we only have enough equipment to burn 1,000 calories worth of energy, so it don't matter how much you're eating, or we can only make 1,000 calories worth of energy a day, and we're really going to be dragging ass here, and
Right.
you're going to feel it for a while. You know what I mean? But then as you start building up that ability to metabolize, now you're getting to the point where you can eat the 80% fat and actually have as much, if not more, energy than you were experiencing before.
Mm.
It
So
takes time for that
that
transition.
yeah, that brings me to exactly my point. I feel like when someone's is asking for a recommendation for a diet, in my humble opinion, I'm the farthest thing from a nutritionist. I think in my head, keto is where you want to go when you want a lifestyle change, not when you're
Mm-hmm.
trying to shed 80 pounds. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I might be wrong, and maybe there are good ways to use it for a temporary effect, or do a couple of months on it and then go back to your life, which I think is just a recipe for disaster. But
Mm-hmm.
generally speaking, I feel like with unlike other diets, I feel like keto specifically, you either do it right or you don't do it at all, and then go do something else, like a calorie deficient, diet, for example. Doggy wants to probably somebody at the door. But what do you think about that? Would you recommend someone going on keto if they're not looking to do an actual lifestyle change, um, and just enjoy its temporary benefits, or would you say, you know what, if you're not looking to change your life, and completely look at food and diet in a different angle, and you're gonna half-ass it, right? Because unfortunately,
Mm-hmm.
most of us do. When we go into diets, we kind of half-ass it,
Mm-hmm.
and guesstimate our calories, and kind of try our best and then splurge somewhere else. And most diets we've ever invented has have built in cheat days, right? So
Mm-hmm.
if someone's going to follow something like that, would you say do keto at all, or just stay away from that? This is for like the pros. Go do like a low carb, um, you know, normal diet that has a built-in caloric deficiency. What do you say?
Yeah, I mean, low carb and getting rid of refined carbohydrates is probably the biggest thing anyone can do to improve their health and lose weight. And yeah, you said it there. Keto is a commitment. And like I was just describing, it takes months to even go through this transition period to a point where keto is working for you and your body's humming and you feel you have enough energy, mental and physical, to go through your normal life. And like this, it's a huge transition process, right?
Mm.
And it just takes, and if you ease yourself into it and you slowly change your macro, this is why tracking macros is helpful, because first you just want to see where you're at right now. What percentage of my fat calories are coming from what percentage of my calories are coming from fat? Maybe you're at 30% fat calories right now, and you might learn that if you start tracking them for a week. And then you
Right.
can go and start introducing some healthier fats, eat more avocados. Maybe you're into nuts or whatever it is. And then now you're going 40%, 50%, 60%. Ooh, I feel a little funny at 60%. Let's stay here for now and wait till I normalize and balance out at 60%, and then keep going up from there. But it's a long-term commitment. And as far as it being a lifestyle change, yeah, it's a temporary lifestyle change. And I think it is great for weight loss, but if you have a good chunk of weight to lose, understand like the minimum commitment at least 3 months, and that's if you're already eating a lot of fat going into it and you're already on a
Mm-hmm.
low carb diet. But at least 3 months. But 6 months is a good round of keto, and you'll see some remarkable effects on your mind and body if you do that. And it's a good transition into fasting as well, because
Right.
you're teaching your body to run on fat calories. Like what you might find if you just try fasting and you don't have any keto background, it's that same your body being able to produce enough energy every day, having the metabolic machinery to produce 2,000 calories worth of energy every day. It takes time to build that up and get all that from fat, which is what you need to do when you're
Mm.
fasting, right?
Right.
Because you're burning your own fat. But if the boiler can only handle 1,000 or 1,500 calories a day, and you fast, you're going to be dragging ass for a week. But like there's people who can fast for a week, and because they've got all this equipment wired up, and they can burn 5,000 calories in a day if they need to from fat, and go run an ultra marathon or whatever they want fasted. Right? There's a guy I was watching not too long ago. He went a week fasted, and then he did some record deadlift of his, some personal best where he deadlift, 2, 3 times his body weight, and it's like,
Right.
like, and that's fasted. And they would say that you're weak after that, but not if your body is wired for that. And
Right.
it takes time to build up that wiring. Yeah. But as far as like, I wouldn't to try it temporarily for a few weeks is exactly what you're saying. It doesn't make any sense. No, you need a much bigger commitment. And I think switching to just getting rid and going to a low carb diet and getting rid of all that refined processed garbage is just a huge step in the right direction. See what that does for your weight loss or whatever it is you're trying to get to, your health. See what that does first, and then you can decide where you want to go from there. But that's a good balance point to aim for, is just cleaning up the diet, getting rid of the toxic stuff, stop poisoning yourself, and just see how you feel when you're not being poisoned. It might blow your mind. All this brain fog that people are experiencing, oh, I don't know why I'm so brain foggy and unmotivated and lethargic. It's like, I'll bet your food has a lot to do with that. Your
Sure.
food and your overall just mental mindset, the story, the narrative you're telling yourself in your head. It's a combination of those two things, the physical and everything that you're putting into your body, and the mental dialogue that you're processing and giving to yourself. How do you talk to yourself in your head? Do you beat yourself up every day over silly things, or are you really, trying to move yourself in the right direction, but doing it in a loving and patient and understanding way where you're just, hey, the whole thing's a game. Let's all just try to keep moving in the right direction and have a good time. How do you
Right.
talk to yourself?
Right. Good. Yeah. Before we dive into that, because that's also on my list to talk to you about, just to close
Mm-hmm.
on keto. I mean, I feel like you made a really good point that it's a bigger commitment for a bigger reward. It takes a lot more to get into it and do it right,
Mm-hmm.
and what you get rewarded with is more better results, which are not
Mm-hmm.
just in weight loss but also mentally and physically and feeling good, and the entire machine gets cleansed and running on all cylinders.
Mm-hmm.
But two things that you said that I feel like are important is when you're in keto, one, the quality of the food not only changes, but it becomes a much more important aspect of your diet, because just having 60 to 80% fat out of your total macros, it can't just come from anywhere. You can't just chug
Mm-hmm.
canola oil in the morning and call it a day.
Mm-hmm.
You will kill
Mm-hmm.
yourself. So having fat come from healthy sources is a huge deal of keto, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Where there's gurus out there, selling keto as, oh, 80% fat, let's celebrate, bacon, blah 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 blah, and fat bombs. Um, the funny thing is, it works in the sense that it puts your body in ketosis, but you're extracting these fuels from extremely bad sources,
It's not
very very bad
sustainable.
fuel.
You're going to have more health problems popping up later. You're going to fix
Right.
some health problems now, but you're creating a heck of a lot more health problems further down the
Right.
road.
And the problem is the keto meter in your blood reads ketosis, right? So people think
Mm-hmm.
they're doing it right. That's one problem. So that has to go out the window, and you can't just,
Mm-hmm.
I hate when people sell the idea of like, oh, this is a fun thing because you can eat all these fun things as you're getting ketosis. Not really. And then another
Mm-hmm.
thing that people really don't take into consideration, no diet in the world is getting you the results you're looking for, specifically in weight loss, if you're not
Mm-hmm.
um, creating a deficiency in your caloric intake. If you're eating
Mm-hmm.
ketosis, 4,000 calories above what your body needs, you're
Keto
going to gain
bombs.
weight in ketosis. You know what I mean? Great. So good job. You're now a ketosis master, and you're processing. And let's say you've been doing this for a year. Your body is a ketosis machine. It's doing it
Mm-hmm.
efficiently, but you're still in the caloric uptake, you're not in a deficit, which means you are
Yeah.
going to gain weight. That's just how things work. There's no free lunches.
Yep.
Let me
It's,
just
it's
decline
really
this
good to
call.
just look big picture. And, as you're introducing keto and fats into your diet, that's the time to get things dialed in. And like even really just basic shit. Like how do you buy a bunch of avocados and maintain them between room temperature and refrigerator and always have ripe avocados to eat every day? Like you got to learn how to do that. It sounds so silly, but like that's a
Right.
big part of eating healthy is that availability and learning how to do that. And it's not just that, but you'll pick some healthy foods to introduce, and it's like, oh, okay, I can do that. And then I eat a lot of like just sardines just for the convenience. Like if I just
Mm,
quick snack, and like you got to have something to snack on for convenience because that lazy part of you is always going to want to go for whatever's convenient and
sure.
close by, and that's when bad health decisions tend to happen. So
Mm,
try to have some nuts or sardines or even like an avocado. Just get used to eating those things and build those habits slowly and and grow from there. And also, just on the note of overall big picture health, meat. Everyone's talking about meat and vegan, not vegan, all this kind of stuff. I think the bigger, more important question is factory farm or grass fed. Right? Is it
mm,
from a fish farm or is it a wild caught fish? Like that is a much bigger and a much more important question than to eat meat or not to eat meat, because there's a huge difference in obviously the ethical treatment of animals would be one way to look at it. That's one perspective for the the
sure.
vegans and
We
whatnot
can
out there.
start there.
but
Yeah.
also
Hmm.
but also you are what you eat, and not only that, but you are what you're eating is eating, if that makes sense. Right? If the
Sure.
cow is roaming around in a field and he's eating grass that's full of nutrition and energy from the sun, and by the way, he's built differently than you, so he's really good at taking nutrition out of plant material and turning it into a fat soluble form, which he then eats and puts into his or excuse me, her own milk or meat or however you want to think about it. Like
Hmm.
the bioavailability of nutrition in animals is significantly different than the bioavailability of the same nutrients in plants. You can absorb, iron a lot better from an animal, for example, than from a plant. And same goes for a lot of other minerals and things that are in vitamins, even that are found in these foods that we're eating. And so there's plenty of arguments for both sides, and you can just eat whatever feels right to you. I was actually vegan for 5 years. And so like I learned a heck of a lot about veganism and how my body responds to it. And then I just, I was looking for more diet experiment and trying something different. I did vegan keto for a little bit too. And, I might, for something opened up my mind to, I think I was hearing about carnivore diet was starting to get popular and people are curing their autoimmune diseases with, carnivore diets and
Right.
stuff. And
Hmm.
that really just kind of made me back up and just like, it's really is the quality. You know what I mean? It's a question of quality. We're omnivores. The question isn't so much which is right, plants or animals. It's a matter of quality and balance, I think, is the bigger question. And there's a huge difference between a factory farmed animal and an animal that's roaming free, in the ocean or in a field somewhere. big difference nutrition wise, right? Like
Right.
the cow in the factory farm is not only eating corn, genetically modified corn, mind you. Not only is he eating that shit, but excuse me, he's eating. They pour liquefied fat on there, and what's in the liquefied fat? It's proprietary, right? The company that makes that stuff is not going to tell you what's in there. That's their own secret sauce. But up until about, I think, 94 or something, it was perfectly legal to take dead cows and feed them to other dead cows on the same operation, right, in the same lot. So if
Hmm.
you're like my age, you've probably eaten a cannibalistic cow burger before, right? You've probably eaten a dead cow that has eaten another dead cow, and like within our lifetime, right? And
Yeah.
that was legal. And now they changed the laws, so you can't do that anymore. You can only feed um, you can't feed the cows to the cows, but you can feed the dead cows to the chickens, and you can feed the dead chickens to the cows. And so they make something called feather meal and just liquefy fat. Anything to fatten up the animals in the most cost-effective way is what it boils down to. That's what a feedlot's all about. That's their job. That's their business model. Fattening up animals as quickly and efficiently, cost-effectively as possible. And so many of them don't even, these animals would barely live 2 years on that diet, right? They only make it about 18 months, and some of them don't even make it to their slaughter date um, because the nature of their health. They have to feed them a half pound of antibiotics every day because they're eating such an unnatural diet. Like that's
Hmm.
why they have so many stomach infections, and that's why they have to keep giving them antibiotics because they're
Sure.
eating an unnatural diet, and it shows up in their tissue, their flesh. That's what you're eating, a diseased animal.
Right.
But anyways,
And
yeah.
those that's a really good argument, the quality of the food, and you've given a few examples, starting with the ethical argument, which I'm a big proponent of, and then, the diet that they feed these animals. But I see it from a third perspective that kind of really opened my eye and curiosity towards, the world of hunting, which
Mm-hmm.
before I only perceived as cruel, and we'll get to that in a second. But there is also the argument that these animals that live in captivity and constantly in their own, feces and extreme conditions,
Mm-hmm.
they are in the most, basic level to the cellular, structure of themselves, are in extreme stress, anxiety, and and stress. They're scared
Mm-hmm.
the whole time. The chickens, the cows, and every other animal we harvest that way, they
Mm-hmm.
live in a very very unnatural way. And if those first two arguments, the ethical and the diet, don't convince you, also realize that they are, every piece of them to the cellular level, as stressed and, fucked up as an
Mm-hmm.
animal could be when they come to your plate. They
Mm-hmm.
lived an entire life of post trauma. you
Misery.
know
Yeah.
they've been in the war zone the whole time,
Yeah.
versus, harvesting a deer with a tag that, was planned to be taken out of nature at the right time, that
Mm-hmm.
instead of living this life of a slaughterhouse,
Mm-hmm.
um, and, inside, his own feces the whole time, and maybe blind with broken feet, he lived
Mm-hmm.
a life in nature, wasn't attacked by a mountain lion and eaten alive for, 3 hours, and if done right, a conscious and hunter that, is doing it with the love to nature, usually puts them down probably instantly. So
Mm-hmm.
it really, from all the options a deer can have in nature, that might be the best one to go, instead of
Yeah.
disease, being hunted by another animal, getting ran over by a vehicle, and whatnot. I
Mm-hmm.
think it's a good cycle. I'm willing to accept for nature,
Mm-hmm.
that a full grown, fully mature animal goes out that way, rather than, these harvesting fields that we have for them, or other
Ter-
ways that even nature has to provide to them. So
Terrible way
I
to live.
prefer
Terrible way to die.
eating that way, much better. I don't hunt personally, but my opinion about it changed completely when I started thinking about it this way. I
Yeah.
don't think that hunting for a sport is something I would ever connect with. Like, I don't want to just kill animals, um, out of joy. I mean, my
No.
experience is very different, and um, to, to like, as a child, you're like, oh, I'll step on some ants. Even that I can't do today. My
Mm-hmm.
experience today is that
That's
it would make
yeah.
me feel horrible. I don't want to kill
Oh, yeah.
anything. Um, And especially in this case, disconnecting to the level that we've gotten disconnected from what we eat and how we got to our plate is scary. And I don't really know how we step back from that, but it looks like there is some forward motion in our collective conscious around, you know, walking away from that. And I think makers are slowly, producers are becoming slowly more and more aware of the fact that if they're not going to get on the wagon, there's going to be producers that are going to get on the wagon of
Hmm.
grass fed and, moral life for these creatures that are just
Yeah.
as important as us here.
Could we please? Yeah. And it's also worth noting that even when I was vegan for 5 years and thinking, oh, good, I'm, saving animal lives, like the fact of the matter is that lots of animals die in plant
Mm,
agriculture. Just the
true.
very nature of having a giant field of crops and the pesticides and the herbicides that are used in there. I mean, they kill off birds, they kill off squirrels. All those animals are dying. Like they don't,
Right.
they don't make it. Um, so no matter what you're eating, something is dying so that you can be here and eat. And that's essentially like what I was talking. Did I open that with you? Like just talking about ego, and it's like you can't be here without an ego. If you truly were selfish and you were like, wait a minute, animals have to die for me to eat. Oh, I guess I'll stop eating then. It's almost like what do you do?
Right. Yeah, no,
But
it's something we have to accept. There's a cycle, there's a circle of life,
yeah.
and for all of us to exist, something else must die.
I do
Um,
have to say also, I've been to some amazing like permaculture farms where they really are getting dialed in on, and it's funny because it sounds like it's new, but it's like ancient tradition. People have figured this stuff out a long time ago, but just ways to keep the energy cycle going. You grow some crops here, and you got cover crops, and these animals eat that crop, and then this animal, and everything just works together if you plan it out ahead of time, and you stop trying to industrialize the whole operation. When you try to industrialize it and maximize profits, it's monocrop, it's chemicals, it's everything. It's production, it's efficiency, it's what's cheap. But when you're actually trying to do what's healthy for you and what's right for the animals involved and everything that you're eating, well, there the efficiency is it's a different type of efficiency.
sure.
And it's not that sort of streamlined industrial model anymore. Now you've got a permaculture farm that's making a little bit of this time of year, a little bit of that time of year, a little bit of this, and like not supplying anything consistently, but like that's how kind of how nature is. It's all seasonal. It just depends. You're not going to have oranges, 365 days a year. It's not natural.
Totally, I totally agree with you, and it's just it all boils down to greed. We
Mm-hmm.
the way we got here is we want all the money, we want all the comfort. The more we
Mm-hmm.
can have of it, the better, and this is how we got to this point.
Yeah, and funny and
Because
funny enough, nitrous oxide. They talk about like you talk about global warming and all these gases, right? And you got carbon dioxide, and then you got methane, which is like 20 times more. I forget what the numbers are, but many times more toxic or bad for the planet than carbon dioxide. And then you've got nitrous oxide, which is actually a byproduct when you use nitrogen fertilizer on crops. That nitrogen fertilizer starts off gassing nitrous oxide, which is actually about 200 times more potent than carbon dioxide. So, like the most
sure.
potent greenhouse gas is a product of industrial agriculture.
Hmm,
That's how we
that's a
feed
good point.
ourselves. That's how we're feeding ourselves right now.
Right, and to your argument, as long as I'm the producer selling it to you as a solution to your perceived problem, that's fine because you're gonna live a life thinking that you're saving the animals. But
Mm-hmm.
while you're doing that, I'm just lining my pockets, and in the meantime, destroying the earth anyway on your expense.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's the hard part. That we don't all have the time to do the research. We don't all have the time to figure out like what's going on, and deal with it and come up with
Mm-hmm.
solutions. But at the end of the day, yeah, if we don't make a collective change in how we look at money, happiness, success, and the very core of what's good for us, we're going to
Mm-hmm.
continue doing it. Somebody else is going to take over the next farm, and they're going to find a way to market themselves as moral and healthy, but also just be money driven. So if
Yeah.
the first priority is making money, there's always going to be everything else at the cost.
what big business does is they buy image. And so they'll wait for the small local startup, the little family farm with the name and the
Mm,
brand. Oh, organic farms, local. Oh, here we are. And then they'll buy that company, and then they just use that label and that branding for, all of their same stuff. They just they use that for the image. That's where so
right,
many of these companies come from that are selling health foods, but they're not
right.
really health food companies. They bought a health food company, and then they turned it into a money making machine.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, you brought conspiracies up in some of your videos, not specific conspiracies, but just like the thought around how those are work. And
Yeah.
I'm interested in that field too because I followed a little bit of Eric Weinstein's theories around kayfabe and
Mm-hmm.
how that works. And it seems like the entire structure of how we perceive our leadership and reality and hierarchies in the human realm is so full of layers that are truth, lie, lie, truth, 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 lie, truth, truths and lies layered up so high that
Mm-hmm.
we only have the ability to perceive some of those layers, and then it starts blending, and you don't know where a
Mm-hmm.
lie starts and the truth begins, and where a truth starts and the lie begins, and
Yep.
that's kayfabe. That's what we did. There's a great guy, Jake. I forget. I'll link his name here. He did a video about kayfabe and how it starts in the WWF back in the day, where they create this world for the observer that when you come there, you're not really sure what's true and what's not. Most people perceive the WWF and WWE today and all these, wrestling as
Mm-hmm.
complete, make believe.
Mm-hmm.
And they want to create that would be not so interesting. So they want to create and insert some truths in there in the plot to make you feel like you're observing something that is reality, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there was one case that he was referring to, which I thought was really interesting as a thought experiment, which is this guy lost some championship and he steals the microphone and goes like on a whole like bender of talking bad about the leadership. Now, as a observer, intelligent observer, you think like, okay, this is all like fake and it's fun. They're making it into like a dramatic scene. And then they
Mm-hmm.
cut off his mic after he starts talking some stuff that is too much, right? This
Mm-hmm.
is where it gets like funny and funky, and kayfabe really starts playing into the mind because that could have been a part of the script, right? Start saying extreme stuff and then we cut you off. Or you actually
Mm-hmm.
are going on a bender and you are saying stuff that's extreme and we are going to cut your mic. This is where
What's
I don't
real?
know as the observer. And kayfabe is designed in a way that you create so many layers of truths and lies that even the players inside the game can't tell the difference between truth and lie. And this is
Yep.
kind of like how I feel about our reality
Yes.
right now and how divide and conquer works. You create this
Yeah.
thing that only very few know what's really going on, and maybe even they start losing track. But most of the people have no fucking clue. Like this is how I feel
Yeah.
about our situation with COVID. There's such a huge division between what to do and how to deal with it. Yes,
Mm-hmm.
vaccines with mandates, no vaccines. Yes, masks, no mask. Closures, not closures. There's no doubt that there's a virus and it's dangerous and it's been politicized in such a crazy way. But the reason it's really
Mm-hmm.
getting people riled up and divided, right? Why it's so hard to agree on it, is because it's
Mm-hmm.
full everywhere you look of truths and lies from both sides.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
people
You
that
have
are
to keep the
afraid of a
water
certain
muddy.
thing insert their truths and lies, and people that are trying to promote a certain thing, they insert those. And that's why it's such a perfect thing to construct kayfabe reality around, is because it has a lot of truths and it
Mm-hmm.
has a lot of room to make up shit,
Yeah.
because it's so there's a lot of room for unknown to be inserted. So I talked a lot. Let me give you an opportunity to respond to that.
Yeah, I feel the same way. You have to keep the water muddy so that people have a hard time making sense of things. Because if people make sense of things and they find out the truth, they're going to storm the Bastille and start chopping off heads, basically. You let how many people die so that you can make a few bucks? You sent our children over to go invade what country under false pretenses? All of these things, if the truth was revealed, it would be very ugly and the people in power would no longer be in power. There's the bottom line. And so in order for those people to maintain their positions of power, you almost have to keep the water muddy. You want people to be, smart enough to be able to, produce and do what you tell them to, but you don't want them so smart and so awake that they start asking questions about what you're doing. Most of our important decisions are made behind closed doors by unelected officials, right? Who owns and controls our Federal Reserve? It's not the government, it's a corporation. Those are private individuals who own and control our central bank and many other central banks in the world. It's those are private individuals. Like there's always the fall person, the face person, the chairman, whoever's on the front line, and you have those names associated with those people. But the owners of the corporation are the shareholders, and they've created corporate laws to protect their identity, right? Like back when I was in business, I used to have a Nevada corporation, and you can't discover who the shareholders are of a Nevada corporation. Like if you want to hide your assets and protect your money, that's what you do. A Nevada or a Wyoming or a Delaware corporation, and the shareholders and all of the value and wealth that they hold is not on paper. It's not documentable. And you can never know who they are because they're protected by law. And that's who owns and controls our central bank. So, if you want to talk about conspiracy or like follow the money, who the hell are those people? How did we end up with this Federal Reserve anyway, right? And that was started back in 1913 or 1914 or something like that. It was right around the time of World War I and a bunch of financing for the loan. And in order for our country to get financing, well, we needed to offer some sort of collateral for the banks, and because there's not the collateral that they would accept is in the form of the payments and the leverage, the money coming in, and so they wanted to leverage the income and tax that and use that to act as service on the loans. If you look this up, like the two happened right around the same time. The Federal Reserve and the income tax both came into being at the same time to service loans that we were accumulating. So that's why we have that.
Right.
The income tax is there to service debt from war. There's no better way to rack up debt than war. And of course, the people who were making the loans were making loans to both sides. Oh, got a loan to these guys here. You need money and weapons to defend yourself. Oh, they're going to invade. You need weapons here and buy the latest technology. Here's, $100 million. And then you go to the other side. Oh man, these guys, they got the latest technology. They're buying up everything over there. Do you have enough technology to fight this war? Because if you don't, they're just going to annihilate you and invade your country. Okay, we'll give you a loan so that we'll make it a fair fight here. Like,
Right.
it's
Right.
the same people
No,
that
it's true. I was
yeah,
shocked when I saw this documentary about American corporations that were banking on the war with Germany
yeah,
and selling them equipment. Ford, and there was this other company, I forget their name, they were making rubber for the tires. They were
yeah,
selling it over there. They
yeah.
also screwed up a neighborhood
The
in the
chemical
USA.
companies making Agent Orange and all that kind of stuff too. It was one of these big name chemical companies, these big pharma companies. I forgot who it was, but they make money on both sides. They profit on
Right.
death.
As long as
You know,
there's
the
money
more
to be made and there's people to lobby with that money, I
yeah,
mean, then that's my biggest problem because we're talking about improving as a species. Um, the issue is we don't have horizon past our own personal life, right? It's kind of like
mm-hmm,
as long as my life is gonna be awesome, then after that, whatever, right? Um,
mm-hmm,
so how do we change that collectively to the point where um, people actually think about the next generation and the next generation? I mean, I think it helps a little bit to have kids. I don't personally have kids because you
mm-hmm,
don't want to leave them with a world that sucks. But ultimately, I think there is something built into us to take care of number one. And that is a good thing and a bad thing. It has advantages and disadvantages. But
mm-hmm.
if I'm, a gazillionaire and I can, have a great life with everything I ever needed, um, and I can take care of myself and do whatever, what motivates me to think next generation and what's going to happen after that? It seems like it's such a hard thing to care about as a living
Mm-hmm.
being that's so finite that
Mm-hmm.
inevitably, yeah, why not? Yeah, sell rubber to the Germans while they're fighting our own people there. Like, how is that even a thing? And I think that's what explains it. It's just we don't really care about what comes after that. We care mostly about ourselves as creatures, and it's our, what drives progression in some ways, and it also what stops it in other areas.
Yeah. If your life is empty and lacking and unbalanced, well, you're going to try to fill that hole, and a lot of people will try to fill that hole with money or drugs or sex or you name it, some form of instant gratification. You could say, not that making money is instant gratification, but it you know, it can of course buy it, but then it's also the power and the control that comes with it,
Sure.
because why do the wealthiest people in the world, why are they still so interested in making money? Is it money they're after? No, no, it's control. They want to control and impose their will on the world. They think they know what's best for themselves and everybody else, and they want to impose their own idea of good on the world, which is exactly
Mm.
the same thing that Hitler was doing. He was trying to make his country a better country and the world a better place by imposing his own idea of what good was on the world. And he was doing it very forcefully. And he was pretty sure that he was right. And that's what the people who
I
are
think
in
he was
charge of the world.
certain. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the problem, is that certainty that you know what's right and you're going to go ahead and force your will on other people. That's where most of the evil in the world comes from. And then when those people get leveraged and they have a lot of power, money, and influence to force and impose their will on the world, ugly stuff happens.
Right. So, do you think we can improve on that as a whole, as a humanity, if we educate people, something that would be like a cultural norm, to educate
Hmm.
people that there is no such thing as I know best. There is
Yeah,
no
how would
such
you
thing as
educate
I
them
can
though?
impose my. What's that?
That's See, like here's the tricky part though, is like, how do you educate them though? How do you convince them that what you're saying is education and knowledge and not what's being disseminated through the power structure and the hierarchy, right? Because
It's a good point.
the system is designed to make people dependent on the system, right? Once you go through there and you say you get a college education and a job and all that kind of stuff, you're now dependent on the system to feed your family. If that's the role that you've accepted, you need everything to keep working the way that it is, right?
Right.
Any dramatic changes to the system, right? If we all, have a revolution or just stop participating in nonsensical bullshit, if we all do that, then the whole system is destabilized and there goes your ability to feed your family. So
Mm.
now those people who are dependent on the system want to preserve the system. And that's what the education indoctrination system does, is it creates people who are dependent and integral parts of the system to preserve the system. And the people at the top who are in control of the system want and need that. They need that structure, and they want everyone to just go along in a predictable way with everything that's been laid out before them. And if you try to disrupt that, then they don't like that, and they're going to,
Right.
have something to say about it. But the short answer to the big question is, they get their power from us. We're the ones that are feeding their corporations. It's our consumption and our consumerism that's making them rich, and it's our
Mm.
willingness to go along with all their plans, even though they don't give us all the information. It's like, what? You want us to go invade what country now? Because you said so? Oh, because you're saying that they did something. Like, the people who are one step ahead of us are always going to know, the manipulators are always going to know exactly what to say to get someone fired up and make them want to go do something, right?
Mm.
Whether it's, go protest in the streets or go fight a war or whatever it is, the people who are one step ahead always know exactly how to manipulate the people who are behind. They're the ones controlling the flow of information, and they know how you're going to interpret the information once you receive it, right? They're the ones who programmed you with this sort of logical, rational system as the highest order, and it's much easier to manipulate logic and rationality than most people realize. Most people think, oh yeah, just think logically, no problem. But when someone's controlling the flow of information, and they know you're going to take logical puzzle piece A and connect it to logical puzzle piece B and reach such and such conclusion, well, you're assuming both of those puzzle pieces are valid, right?
Right.
You're not looking at the fact that maybe someone is trying to manipulate you and do something to maintain their power and control,
Mm-hmm.
expand their global empire. Like, that doesn't even enter into the equation for a lot of people, that the information, the facts you're using for your decision making may not actually be facts. Even the
Right.
scientific facts, like I just said, 40 to 50% of these things we're finding out, they're either invalidated or it's found that it can't be replicated. Well, who funded the study? Oh, some corporation funded the study, It's like, it goes
Yeah.
all the way back to like all these, Kellogg's and breakfast cereal. Where do we get the idea that, fats and eggs were bad for us, right?
Hmm.
And I'm pretty sure it was Kellogg. It was one of those breakfast cereal companies, but they paid some researcher. Ansel Keys was the name. You can look it up. And he did this study where he demonstrated that refined carbohydrates and breakfast cereal are actually better for you than eggs. And bacon from an actual healthy farm raised pig. You know what I mean?
Sure.
And they did a study to prove this, right?
Yeah.
And then we find out
History is
years
full of
later,
that.
oh, that was that. We find out years later that was complete fraud. That was bullshit. That was not
Right.
true at all. But that was a peer reviewed study, though. I thought peer review is designed to catch, like, if your peers, if you're using science to validate science, this is circular reasoning. If your peers went through the same indoctrination process as you, then you're not much different than a Christian going to a Christian pastor and saying, I want to find out if the stuff in this Bible is true. Could you take a look at it and tell me if it's true? Is that true? Like, what do you think he's going to say? He's gone through the same indoctrination process as you. He has the same perspective, And when I say same, and I know people are going to be arguing, no, scientists are different. They disagree all the time. I'm like, all of your assumptions, so many of them, at least 80% of your assumptions in your worldview is the same. And so you're going to
Sure.
reach the same conclusions. Obviously there are things you disagree on, but a lot of your underlying assumptions and your whole methodology is exactly the same. You're not even considered a scientist unless you follow the methodology and you make
Right.
assumptions about, oh yeah, we can isolate variables. Yeah, that's a valid study. No, yeah, it's it's this whole circular
It's
thing.
very interesting. I'm reading a book right now. It's called Thinking in Systems, and
Hmm.
there's this quote in there, somewhere in the very beginning, and I really liked it. It goes something like, we're talking about being fed facts and stuff like that, right? And thinking that 1 plus 1 is equal to a conclusion. Um,
Hmm.
and the quote goes something like, most people think that they know that 1 plus 1 equals 2 is a equation that's already solved. But you also, if you know what one is and the other one is, you also need to understand what and is. So
Hmm.
there's always going to be something in the equation that can be misinterpreted or assumed, right? Because we're talking about these
Hmm.
false assumptions to make you feel
Hmm.
like what you're putting together is the ultimate truth.
Hmm.
And that's where things get really scary. I'm going to refer Yuval Harari the third time now because he wrote this third book. Um, I recommend all of his books, but talks about, he starts with history in his first book, kind of on present time on his second, and goes into the future on the third. And the third is the scariest one when, he talks about being hacked as humans, where there's
Hmm.
so much data collected on us that it gets to the point that a corporation that wants to plant an idea in your head and make
Hmm.
you feel you thought it, you came up with this,
Hmm.
wonderful assumption or conclusion, it became too easy, scarily easy. And now, we're hacked humans, maybe
Hmm.
not fully, but really on the way there. It's really hard to go um, online, try to do some research, and escape the fact that potentially whatever it is you're looking for, it's already set up for you to find the thing that somebody wants you to find. Um, and it's
Yeah.
designed that way because of your ethnic background, your where you are, what's your age, everything was collected around you to
Yeah.
find the buttons that click the best on you to make you do a certain thing.
Yeah.
We've never had so much power over the population because everybody is now connected to a device that's an instant access to their, consciousness, instant information device that, once back in the day, you could say we only had the radio. So we had an hour a day to influence people. Then we came with the TV.
Hmm.
People were sitting there in front of the TV on the lazy boy for 2.5 hours. You got some more time. Now,
Books have been
every
written on
part of
that.
the day,
The
yeah, every waking
Hmm.
minute, you can influence people. You can collect information about them and influence them in a more effective way, more and more and more. And I think if you accept it as a fact, the only positive thing that's left to realize out of that is that you can also grow and communicate in a more effective way as a community that wants to push away and resist that type of
Hmm.
control. So your
Hmm.
message on TikTok has reached an amount of people that would be inconceivable even 5 years ago. It was,
Mhm.
it's with in relation to how hard it was to get to that point. Um,
Mhm.
so I think the only way out of this is if there are forces that are using this technology to influence the masses in a way that is against what I would perceive. Let's say I represent a person in the mass. The way I
Mhm.
would perceive a good, happy life is to
Mhm.
speak up and get out there and talk and induce conversation. And even if it
Yeah.
seems relatively insignificant, the more we engage in it as a population and share it with the world, this is why content creation became such a huge thing, is because we are flipping the script. Maybe
Mhm.
it's an illusion that we think that we're doing that because, that's actually designed to make us, focus here instead of there where the real power is. Or
Mhm.
maybe there's hope to change the power balance and give it to the person, because who the fuck would ever listen to Joe Rogan 15 years ago, right? Now
Mhm.
more people listen to him than they do to CNN and Fox News combined,
Mhm.
and a million other podcasters, right? I'm not specifically referring one. He's just somewhat of, perceived as the goat of podcasting.
Mhm.
Um, so that's exactly my point. I feel like we can flip the script and create content on every level to create communities and spread messages that are
Mhm.
more associated with what we feel as a community is right versus what the narcissist wacko thinks is right for everybody. What are your
Yeah.
thoughts on that?
Communication is one of, if not the biggest, most important things that we should have been taught and spent 12 years on in school, but we didn't. We spent 12 years on math, right? Learning a bunch of stuff that 99% of the people don't care about, don't use, had to suffer through. But communication, um, that's the most important thing. We need to learn how to talk about stuff that we don't agree on. Like that's how it's the communication is what prevents war and fighting, right? If we learn how to talk about our differences and work it through, then we're a lot less likely to go invade someone else's country or punch them in the face or whatever on any level that we're talking about. If the communication and the openness and the patience and the understanding is there and the love is there, and it's like, hey, okay, we're fellow human beings, you believe differently than me. Wow, that's interesting. How did you get there? what
Right.
what made you think that? Like, let's talk about it. That's interesting. How does someone come to believe that? Let's talk about it. Like,
Hmm.
that's the approach that needs to be made, and that's really, one of the many things that we should have been taught. And even if you weren't taught that, that's what we need to spend more time on practicing, is talking about our beliefs with people who believe differently than us. That's
Sure.
really where the money's at. That's really how you make the world a better place. And geez, so much conflict on a personal and a global level could have been avoided if that was part of our proper we were talking about education earlier. This is one of those essential subjects that we should have been working on from day one. Is the equivalent of philosophy and debate every year, regular part of schooling and class, and being able to discuss differences. That's where all the goddamn conflict is coming from. People aren't able to talk about their differences in a civilized way, and they
Sure.
keep holding on to previous grudges and previous things that were done wrong, and no one wants to just drop the BS and stop that cycle of negativity and hate, if you will. That reverberates back and forth. You have plenty of conflict areas and stuff in the world where it's like, hey, you killed my family, but you killed my family. And they're like, well, you did it first. Well, yeah, because you cut us off of the food and the water supply, and you indirectly killed us. And I'm like, well, you only did that because, and it goes back on this infinite regress there.
Right.
But it's this back and forth reverberation in a world full of mirrors. At some
Hmm.
point, you got to just drop the bullshit and realize, and if the bullshit is ever going to be dropped, it's going to be after a good talk and some open communication and
Sure.
understanding. And then maybe there's an opening where two people just decide to squash the beef and forget about all the brothers and sisters and family members that we've killed of each other. It's like, you know what, we've actually talked now. I don't like it any more than you like it. We both don't like this. Let's just stop perpetuating the cycle of hate and killing and all this negative shit. Let's just stop. But
Hmm.
you need communication first for that. You need understanding. You need rapport. You need trust. That's all
Right.
required, and you can't have that without communication.
Sure. I agree 100%. And maybe that's just the optimist in me, but I feel like the internet and these new mediums of communication
Hmm.
are hopeful. They generate
Yeah.
hope in me that people have, because I see your channel, right? For example, almost a quarter million people, they feel that your message strikes a chord with them enough to subscribe to your channel and want to watch more, right? That doesn't even include the total amount of people that were exposed to your content, but just people that decided they're going to subscribe to it. And that means something. It means something big. It means that this message, that's not about money, that's not about fame, that's not about all the bullshit symbolic crap that we came up with as symbols for success.
Hmm.
People are interested in that. And if you really look closely, what seems to be trending the most right now is being kind, honest, candid, and not the bullshit. Here's my Lambo and here's my story. Remember, what was that guy's name? I forget. He
So many
used
of
to make
them. Ty Lopez, I think, was one of them.
Ty Lopez. Yeah, he's the
Because I used to
classic one.
watch
There
all
was
this.
many ones,
Yeah.
but he's the classic story when you think about that. Bullshit. Oh, like I'll just oops, I have my Lambo here. Oh, let's go to my book room,
Uh-huh.
and
And he started a
that
whole generation of other people doing the same thing.
right, and it strikes a chord with the greedy part of us, but it works on the same concept, which is we gave the world, every wacko individual has now direct contact with this medium, with this platform to communicate. And it seems like there's a trend, to me, it seems there's a trend that a lot of people are attracted to things that are more meaningful, to things that are
Hmm.
more around kindness, candidness, happiness, and not the pursuit of materialistic things. Yeah, we're still doing some of that. Habits die hard, as they say. But there's an uprising in a direction that I'm personally a fan of, and I feel like it makes me hopeful. Like some people, I grew up in Israel, so a lot of people ask me naturally, like, what do I think about the Palestinian and Israeli conflict? And for me, it was kind of a lost cause for a very long time because it's so deeply rooted in the ideological problem that both sides have. But I always thought that education and communication could be the way to do that. For
Hmm.
Gaza, for example, was always deprived from anything communication, right? It was very closed off. And I thought
Hmm.
maybe one day if every kid there had an iPhone or a smartphone, not an iPhone, just anything connected to the internet, and they can do their own research, their own
Hmm.
exploration of truths, and we don't just present it to them. And I'm talking to Israelis and Palestinians in the same
Yeah.
tone because they both get indoctrinated. Um, that's the thing that can get us out of there. And I see it
Hmm.
happening already. I see people coming out of Gaza and saying, "Oh my gosh, I've been taught to hate." I see people come out of Israel say, "Oh my God, I've been taught to hate." And that's the generation that if they can go
Hmm.
online, and I'm talking about people that went online and gained an audience and made a difference, that's the
Hmm.
generation that could use this medium and platform to liberate themselves from brainwashing. The question to me is what's going to happen faster? We figure out how to liberate ourselves from the brainwashing, or the brainwashers
Hmm.
figure out how to use this vehicle to rebrain us even, rebrain wash us even stronger and more efficiently. So,
Balance and symmetry. It's like this climactic, both sides are building up to the, it's like there's going to be something big happening. Who's going to end up on top, good or evil? It's
yeah,
like biblical. Seriously, it's this struggle,
Star
for
Wars
heaven
all
and earth
over
that's
again.
been going on. It's cyclical. It's been going on for a while, and it's just it's really hard to see who's going to come out on top or how to, what do you even do? And the simple answer is that it's non-participation is the answer. Like we're the ones who are giving them money and power and going
Hmm.
along with all the the nonsense. Really, that's not really a better word for it, but we're going along with whatever they're saying the plan is. Oh, which country do you want us to invade next? Which is next on your global conquest plan? Okay, we'll send our children over there. Oh, you're saying they're bad guys and we need to kill them? Sure, no problem. It's like,
Even on
you
simpler
know,
things, like when people tell me that they hate how CNN is warping news or Fox News is warping reality, and they each see their own channel the way they want to see it. um,
Mm-hmm.
I always say it's not the media that's corrupting you. We
Mm-hmm.
corrupted the media. We are at home clicking and watching for hours and hours and hours, and they're tracking it. They're saying, oh, this guy likes it.
Yeah.
Let's see if this
Yeah.
works. And then they're tracking that, and it seems to work even more. You
Mm-hmm.
created this. When you're pointing a finger, I always tell people, when you're pointing a finger to blame, there's three fingers pointing right back at you. One
Yep.
second. Be the change you want to see in the world. You can't just go and say, "Oh, CNN is making up lies and they're, indoctrinating everybody to be this way." And then the other guy says, "No, Fox News is doing it that way." They're both
Yep.
doing whatever you ask them to do. You wanted more
Yep.
extreme news. You wanted more dramatic this. You wanted more division. You wanted more tribalism. They
You
only are
got it.
reflecting what we wanted. So stop blaming
Yep.
them and start being the change. Go out there and talk to your neighbor and say, I'm really sorry for not having you over for Thanksgiving over politics. Let's have a beer immediately and fix this. Be the
Mm-hmm.
change you want to see in the world. You can't just blame, 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 because everything that's happening in the big scale collectively is something we created. We asked for it.
Yes. We're the ones voting with our eyeballs and our dollars on what we want more of.
Sure.
Oh my God, these corporations came to power and they're taking over the world and destroying everything. How did they get into power? Oh, it was us? We're the ones who gave them that
Shit, did
power?
we vote them
Oh,
in?
shit.
Yeah.
So it's like, how do you take the power away? Stop giving them your money. But like, that's the problem, is this collective action problem, right? How do you
Mm.
get everyone to rise as one? How do you get everyone to just decide, yes, we need to, there needs to be a certain critical mass of people who just, get everyone else on with the
Yeah.
program and moving away from, just stop giving those guys power, stop giving them money, stop giving them attention and eyeballs, communicate more
Yeah.
with each other and
Yeah, I don't want to
less with
go into
them.
depressive matters, but there's also the philosophical question of like what's actually better long term, net positive. Are we better off as a humanity to just be ruled and upset and talk about how much we don't like it, or are we better off liberated and living in what we perceive as fantasy land? Everything works out, but then the net result would be something that we don't actually like. We don't know because we don't really exist in that realm. We never did. What do you
Hmm.
think about that?
What do you mean by the net result would be something that we don't like if we worked
I
and
don't know.
changed reality?
Maybe if we made the change that me and you deem positive, and
Hmm.
stop. Um, Basically, it's kind of like taking hierarchy and reshaping it completely because
Hmm.
everyone you're going to put at the top, they say power, ultimate power, corrupts
Corrupts.
you ultimately, right? And I think it's true. Even I have a good example from our previous prime minister in Israel, Bibi Netanyahu. He came from a place in history where I can remember his good intentions in his eyes, and then he
Hmm.
turned to what a lot of Israelis would deem as corrupt, and that just happens and happens and happens everywhere. And
Hmm.
if we want to do away from with that structure, what's going to be the new thing? Are we just going to
Yeah.
find a
Are
way
we gonna
to
like
have
it
a
more than
balanced
what we have
utopia?
now? Yeah, that's just the nature of change. It's like it's this back again to what we were saying about trial and error. If you're going to change something and try to make it better, the transition, of course, is not going to be comfortable or enjoyable. And then also, once you get somewhere new and you're experiencing the change, well, that's just like the first stepping stone. They're still gonna. It's not like that's going to be the other side of the fence and the grass is going to be greener and everything's going to be perfect. Like no, that's the
Sure.
first step into a whole brave new world. And then we got to start from square one. And what we start with may not necessarily be better than what we have now, because so much of the way that the world is set up now with centralized power, all these systems, and
Right.
you can have oranges from Florida and tea from China, all the same day in the same place. In
Right.
Alaska, you
But
can have
maybe
these two
that's why
things
we're
at the
not
same
doing that.
time.
It's because it's the unknown and because it's scary. It's
Well,
because
that's exactly it. Everyone wants to stay with where they're comfortable. All of these things they're habituated to, they're addicted to, they're familiar with. Like this is where the joy in their life is coming from. So what we're talking about is taking the joy out of life, and no one wants to do that.
sure. That's very true. All right, let's finish on a positive note. You talked about lower self and higher self and positivity.
Mm-hmm.
I've observed in life, that there's more positive people, less positive people, more optimistic people, and more
Mm-hmm.
pessimist people. Do you
Mm-hmm.
think an adult can be trained to change their perception on positivity, or is it something that you were taught a certain way and you're stuck? The reason I bring this up and I want your opinion is because I feel like I just been nurtured to be positive. And then when
Mm-hmm.
people are negative, I'm like, why are they negative? But clearly, it's because
Mm-hmm.
they were, had experiences and nurtured to be more
Yeah.
perceiving of the negative and seeing that. And the way a lot of people can associate is, just for an example, when something happens and you said, "Oh, God did that to me," or "The universe did that to me," or "It always happens to me," or you stub your
Mm-hmm.
toe and I stub my toe. I think like, well, and another person might think, "Oh my gosh, I can't fucking believe this happened." You know, the perception, is it something that after it was molded into your um, core can be changed and trained to get out of, you think? Or is it something that is pretty much what you got?
Oh, we can definitely change that. That's a big part of my coaching and what I do every day with people is trying to help them reframe their life and everything that's going on into something more positive and constructive and empowering, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because you need to feel somewhat good about yourself and empowered if you're going to affect any sort of change in your life. It's very hard when you're at the lowest low, the bottom, and life has just been, kicked you to the curb and stomped you down. Like when you're feeling low like that, it's hard to affect change. Like, go to the gym. Like, why? Oh, well, you should eat healthier and clean up. Well, I'm not even sure I want to live still. Why am I going? What? Why would I want to do all that? You know what I mean? It's
I
like,
understand.
let me just have a drink right now so I don't, go blow my brains out or something. Like when you're at the lowest low there, you're not in a constructive state of mind to affect any change. But as you start sort of, raising your vibes and getting in touch with that higher self, and finding little bits of empowerment, one little increment at a time. Like if you're, I don't know, addicted to something toxic, if you, or like even like with the food and the fasting, like what we were talking about, whatever it is, just create some space for willpower and discipline. Go an hour
Right.
without a cigarette, without food, without drugs, without whatever. And then once you demonstrate to yourself that you can actually do that, well, now you can actually write about it. And for example, law of attraction and affirmations, if you're trying to write out affirmations like, I am, I am healthy and happy and I take good care of my body, and you just had, donuts for breakfast and a cigarette, like, you're not going to believe it and you're not going to feel it. But the day
Sure.
that you skip that and you wait an hour after waking up before you put anything toxic into your body, and you wait, and then now you can actually write down, I have, I don't put toxic stuff into my body. I can make it until 10 a.m. without poisoning myself. Like, you can actually write that and feel it because you actually just did it. It's real. You can believe it and you can feel it. And so finding a little space to carve like that, of course, is a big step in the right direction. And I'm so sorry, but I forgot the original question. What we're talking about.
No, you answered it. You answered it right at the beginning. We were talking about, training for, positive perception,
Mm-hmm.
and that it's a big part of your coaching. So
Yeah, that's, you know there's definitely, it's changing habituations. It's what it is, right? Some habits for some people are going to be much deeper ingrained than for other people, and it's going to be
mhm,
harder for them. They're going to be a lot more resistant. It's going to be a lot more painful and uncomfortable, right? So all of this is ties into the sort of upbringing and the sort of groove, the habituation that you're in.
sure.
And a change, of course, is possible. And I see people going through it. I see myself go through it, and it's a very real thing. But a big part of my philosophy is just finding incremental steps in the right direction, and to stop taking those major steps backwards. You know what I mean? It's
Yep.
amazing how much progress you can make. If you've been living your whole life taking one step forward, one step backwards, one and a half step forward, one step backward, it's amazing what happens when you just stop taking steps backwards. If you just stop poisoning yourself and you just stop doing things that are bad, and you change your habituation and you rewire just all of your focus, your energy, your awareness, once you start directing that towards the things that you want and not so much on the things you don't want. And of course, this ties into meditation. Every time you find yourself thinking about stuff that you don't want, most of the pain and suffering in life comes in the form of thoughts. Like, it's in your mind. That's where these are coming. Even if someone just died, your loved one just died 5 minutes ago, and now you're here crying, "Oh my God, what am I?" Well, are they dying right now before your no, they already died. So this is all existing in your mind already. It's a thought. And in some cases, you can release these thoughts and let go of them. And in some cases, like in this case here, when it's really powerful, you need to be really practiced and experienced and have a really good understanding of death if you're just going to let it go and brush it off. But the whole idea is that this is a skill you can learn. letting go of thoughts and as they arise. This is what meditation is. And the more you do that, the more you're able to get rid of the suffering in life,
Right.
because most of the suffering is in the form of thoughts.
Right. Have you heard of Jocko Willink?
Oh yeah, I like him.
Yeah, he wrote.
He's him and David Goggins are my go-to guys when I feel a little discipline
Yeah.
and badassery.
Yeah, I go to David Goggins when I'm exercising and I feel like stopping. He just
Mm-hmm.
like shows up like an angel on my like a little David Goggins shows up on my shoulder and he's like, "Bitch, don't even think about that."
You're
And
complaining about
the
how many you did. You did 20 pull-ups, and you're complaining. I did
it,
6,000.
yeah, like he's like his little version that's on my shoulder is like in the middle of like a 150-mile run, and he's like 100 miles in, and I'm on the
Uh huh.
treadmill like mile 6. Shut up.
Uh huh.
But
Yeah.
the reason I
Yeah.
brought up Jocko is in reference to what you said. It's finding the good in anything, and he has this epic, somewhat almost comical bit that he recorded in his podcast, and it's also in his book that's called Good. And he
Mm-hmm.
basically describes how everything that happens is good. And this story that it goes something like, I'll give you the short version, but it's really interesting, and I'll probably link that here too because I feel like it's really helpful, and it just kind of it's a shortcut to finding positive in shitty things. And
Mm-hmm.
it's a story about them being in Iraq, I think, and one of his officers, his subordinates, used to come to him with problems, and he would respond good. And
Mm-hmm.
it was kind of like a funny thing until this guy had a bigger problem, and he came up to him and he already said, "Jocko, I know what you're gonna say. It's kind of like annoying, it's whatnot." And I'm like, "What am I gonna say?" And he said, "Well, you're gonna say good." And the point is, this is kind of like where he teaches him like good, like, okay, we fucked up a mission, gotta go back, more time to train. You know, we
Mm-hmm.
couldn't get this really high top end gear we wanted. Good, more time to get better with the stuff that we do have. Or we got
Mm-hmm.
injured in training jujitsu. Good, time to take a break and rethink your strategy and go through some brain exercises. Whatever
Mm-hmm.
happens, and he even goes as far as referring death of a person that's close to you that has that good. You had all these experiences with this person. These memories that you've had and experiences don't die. You still have that forever. And there's constant, good in every experience that you have, whether you like it or not. It's your ability to focus on that and latch on that and use that as a step or a stepping stone towards the next thing. That's up to you. You can
Mm-hmm.
feel beaten down by life and everything that happens is just bad, 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 because all these experiences are subjective. They all happen to everyone the same way. It's how you perceive it is how it's going to serve you. And that attitude of good to whatever happens is just something you decide to do. Okay, how can I extract value of what just happened? You don't have to go to these extreme examples of somebody dying. Just, right now you go and get in a small bumper to bumper accident because you were looking at your phone. You can go and say, "Oh man, it's gonna cost me $1,000," and blah blah blah, or you can say, "Good, I shouldn't fucking look at my phone. There's a really good lesson right here.
Mm-hmm.
Good, it didn't happen at 90 miles per hour. You know, good, nobody got hurt.
Mm-hmm.
There's so much from that experience that you can extract and say, this is what I'm gonna do with this and construct a better life moving on, rather
Mm-hmm.
than just saying, this just fucked up my day." And that's up
Yeah.
to you to decide.
It's mental alchemy. You know what I mean? Taking anything and everything that's coming at you and turning it into something useful. Oh, here's some lead. Okay, let me turn it into gold. It's you're surrounded. There's plenty. Life is going to keep serving you up. Shit, and it's going to keep serving you up gold. You get a little bit of gold, and that's nice. Those are freebies. But what you really want to learn how to do is turn shit into gold.
Right.
And a
Yeah,
lot of that just
turning
happens with
lemons into that lemonade that everybody likes.
yeah, and it's positive reframing. Like that's all your growth is going to come from hardship and doing difficult things that are outside your comfort zone. Your growth
Right.
is going to come from the unplanned, the unexpected. You know, that's where it all comes
Sure.
from. That's what makes you powerful. That's what makes you into a more effective human being that can bring about the life that you want. It's that sort of stuff
That's what
right
I
there.
don't like that saying about the path of least resistance. The
Yeah.
path of resistance is where you get. It's almost like saying when you try to make a fire with wood, just spin the little stick in the air. No
Mm.
friction, no fire.
Right.
It's not
Right.
doing anything. You gotta
Right.
press it down hard and spin it against that wood to create a lot of friction before fire comes about. And
Mm-hmm.
that's the same thing in life. If you're just out there on the gym, kind of neutral, doing your own thing for the last 6 years, you've been doing the same routine on the elliptical and your body can't even feel it, there's no traction there. Just because you're doing it
Right. You're
doesn't
in
mean
your
shit.
comfort zone. You're in your comfort zone, and you're not growing as you bob around on the elliptical watching your favorite TV show. It's you're barely. It's better than nothing, but like, why not take another step? Into the unexplored. Try something new.
Sure.
Challenge yourself a little bit. That's where all the growth is coming from.
Right. No, it's definitely
Yeah,
better
yeah.
than nothing. And I agree completely. I hope people do that versus nothing. But I also
Mm-hmm.
encourage people that if they want growth, right, if that's the thing you want, some people don't. They just want to be where they are, and that's okay.
They want
If
comfort and
growth,
security.
right, if growth is what you're after, you have to get uncomfortable and you have to get comfortable being uncomfortable. You know,
Mm-hmm. That's a
Cameron
good way of putting
Haynes,
it.
this ultra runner hunter guy, he also talks about like falling in love with that burn, in your muscles.
Mm-hmm.
It's just uncomfortable, but this is the area that you want to that you want to get to. And if you're not in it, you're not getting the results you're after.
The more you
So
do it, the more you habituate to it. And the more you do that kind of stuff, the better you feel afterwards. It changes your body chemistry as far as
sure.
dopamine and serotonin goes. You get much more sensitive to like dopamine, for example, after a
Mm,
workout, right? After you
sure.
put yourself through an hour of hardship and you're really, pushing yourself there, like afterwards, everything feels a lot better. Simple things, just like that normal meal. If you had eaten that just average healthy meal without exercising and you just ate it at your normal lunchtime, well, it would have been a pretty average meal. But now that you've, you know, pushed yourself and you've changed your body chemistry, now that same food tastes better. Like your chemistry is literally different
There's no
after you go
argument.
through hardship. Yeah.
Sure. I totally agree. And it's kind of funny how annoying it is. And I hate to repeat Joe Rogan because he always says that. And I, by no means or extent of the imagination, want to compare myself to him. But it's true. He constantly repeats this. If you go out on a workout and at that moment that you just do not want to go to, and you say, oh, this is so cozy, I'll stay in my in my jacket at the house, in the blanket on my couch with all the pillows.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of reasons why you shouldn't go, or makes you not want to, but that only manifests itself, that positive result only manifests itself after you went and came back. And it's
Mm-hmm.
annoying because you don't get a taste. Because if you would get a taste from the lazy spot, you would probably
Mm-hmm.
be motivated enough to go. But it's
You
not
got
like that.
you
You
got
have
to
to
be
be
the first
disciplined
mover.
enough. Right.
Yeah.
You have to push through and tame, that weak spot that tells you what you maybe you called it lower self in your one of your videos, lower self, higher self. You
Mm-hmm.
have to tame that lower self and tell them, no, 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 no. This is what we're doing. We're going anyway, and we'll see how we feel after that. And 100% of the times, that's better.
Yep, yep. And even just that exposing yourself to it, like going to the gym, it's like no matter what, like for me, I have like activity standard. Nobody ever get into that, but like real short and real simple activity standards every day. Like no matter what, I'm walking for 20 minutes. Doesn't matter how I feel, doesn't matter what else is going on. I need
Hmm.
to move for at least 20 minutes every day in the form of at least a walk or 20 minutes of light yoga stretching, right? And it's that same thing. And like once you do that and you go to the gym and you get on the treadmill and you start walking, well, now you're much more likely to do something else. And I try to get
Sure.
people to do like even like meditation, for example, or like journaling exercises. Don't overcomplicate them. Go write one sentence. Go sit down, find your meditation space, and just sit for 1 minute and practice getting over that inertia, that first hurdle. You know
Right.
what I mean? Focus all of your energy and attention on getting over the inertia and the hurdle first. And then you get really good at going to your meditation space or whatever it is, or just sitting down and closing your eyes for a minute. And then now you can just build on top of that. But you got to break the cycle of no, I'll save it for later. No, I'll get to it another time. Just start building the habit now, and you got to be that
Right.
that first
Yeah, that's
mover.
where a
That
routine gets really important. There's a book called Atomic Habits. I don't know if you
mm-hmm.
had a chance to
James
check it out, but
James yeah
it's
yeah
it's exactly what you're talking about. It's creating that compounding. value where you just do that thing every day. It doesn't have to be big. It doesn't have to be significant. It's the
Mm-hmm.
compounding result and value you're going to get after, which is going to
Yep.
be, if you go on a 20-minute walk every day, the likelihood of you going on a 6 mile run is a way higher than if your standard is not doing anything.
Mm-hmm.
So, and of course, just the general result compounding over time is going to be much better than doing nothing. But it doesn't
Yep.
have, I feel like this is where talking about New Year's resolution, where everybody's now going to write down all the stuff they're not going to do after one day. Um, the biggest mistake and my favorite thing about these resolutions is, to keep them so freaking stupidly simple and small.
Mm-hmm.
Just do those. We
Yep.
don't do them, and we don't like writing those down because they seem insignificant, right? That minute of meditation or that 20-minute walk. Like, what is that going to do for me? It's going to be the game changer. That's
Mm-hmm.
what's going to cause you to change your complete day and have a new habit and have a new standard and routine that's going to open up a world of opportunity for you.
Yep.
But if you set up your goal to run 6 miles every day and you haven't ran in your life, you're going to fail day one and never going to do it again, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So start with something versus nothing. I
Yep.
totally agree with that. But
Yeah.
we've been going for probably like 3 hours. I don't even know.
I've enjoyed the conversation. So maybe you see me sweating over here. It's like high noon in the desert right now, and I'm living my dream life in my van, my sweat box.
Hey, man, everything has advantages and disadvantages. Tell
Uh-huh.
people where they can find more of you on social media, and also generally if they want to reach out to you for coaching and stuff like that.
Yeah, I go by spiritual growth guy. So most of my activity is on TikTok, like you mentioned, and then I also have the same content duplicated on YouTube. I'm on Instagram and Facebook as well under the same name, Spiritual Growth Guy. And what I'm trying to do now is get more longer form content for YouTube. So that'll be
Hmm.
unique for my TikTok visitors. But I definitely want to get into more of these kinds of interviews here. Really enjoyed our talk today. This is like all my favorite stuff. This is what I read about this stuff. I write about this stuff. This is what I'm into every day. Like after this, I'm probably going to go to the gym and plug in some earbuds and listen to some podcast or someone else talking about all the same stuff we were just talking about. It's like it's an obsession.
Yeah,
It really is. But I think I think it's important to just pick something and if it's helping people and you're good at it, then go for it. But yeah, I'm on those social platforms. I have got spiritualgrowthguide.com as well, which is like my central hub. It's more just links than anything. And
hmm,
then my email is spiritualgrowthguy@gmail.com. And all that stuff is on my website there where you can find, the email and coaching link, and all my social links are there as well.
awesome. Well, Sean, I really appreciate your time. Conversation was
Mm-hmm.
really good. I had a lot of fun talking to you, and
Mm-hmm.
hopefully we can do it again sometime soon.
Hopefully in person. You're on my list now. I'm doing a lap around the country here, and definitely going through Colorado.
Well,
And
yeah. I keep trying to convince people to come to the studio. I put all this together for you, so there's your
oh,
seat right there.
that could be my seat. That's it right there. Cool, man. I like it.
Awesome, man. Cool.